Good evening. Welcome to Charter Township of Grand Blanc Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October 8th. And Mr. Massey, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. We have a full agenda, so we'll jump right into it and call the meeting to order. And I'll ask for approval of this evening's agenda.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Support.
Okay, there's been motion, support, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we are going to open the floor for public comment. We just ask that you watch out for the laptop that we have for a presentation that's coming up shortly. But I'd invite anybody in the public that would like to speak at this time to come forward. And we ask you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Give your name and address. So we'll start in the front of the room. And we'll move our way to the back. Anybody in the back? Mr. Ert? Good evening.
Good evening, Ed, 7212 Porter Road, and I promise not to mess this up, I hope. I want to give a big thanks to our police department. They helped me out on Saturday. Just to tell you the story, I was away from the house for a while with my wife and me, and we care for her elderly aunt, which is 91 years old. And every once in a while, she tries to put her shoes on standing up and not sitting down, and she falls down. And I have to go over there and pick her up. She never hurts herself, but I was away from the house and I got a call to do something about it. So I was thinking about it, I got to go back home and pick her up, but my wife called the police department. They went over there and they picked her up. Everything's fine. You know, I couldn't ask for more from a community, a police department. It's not just about policing bad guys, it's about being part of the community and helping, and that's what they do. I thank the police department for that. And I thank this board for creating this police department, allowing us to have it. So I just really want to thank you. And I'd like to move on to the next one, and I'll try and be brief, okay? I noticed on your agenda for Thursday, item 7, in regards to a disconnect for water services. I can remember over a decade ago I came to this board, which most of you weren't here. The sewer and water rates were being raised. And I came to this board to find out why. I was given the answer that we were building the southern end of the township and we needed funding to build. Infrastructure. So rates went up, we built the infrastructure down in the southern end of the township. Now I see on your agenda they're talking about disconnecting it. Did I make a bad investment? We did. When the next thing gets built in this township, it's the residents that live here and the businesses that pay for it. Future infrastructure. So I just want to bring that to your attention. I was here when that all started, and we paid for it, and we should utilize it. I did have one idea down in Canton Township when my daughter was building a house. She got her first water bill. It was over $1,000 for 3 months. Her grass. So she went and she tried to see if she could get a well put in. I'll pay to put in a well just to irrigate my lawn. Nope. Her development was put in with the intention to have that. Hooked up irrigation to municipal water. And it would affect their county, Canton Township, if they disconnected from it. So they're stuck with it. But that's how it was developed. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move it back up to the board. Okay. Yeah, please come forward and give your name and address and...
John Ziska, 5494 Park Grove Court, Grand Blanc.
Okay.
I don't know if this is the time to talk about it or if it's coming up later, but I'm having a new house built on McCandlish Road. It's a 3-acre parcel, and I've already hooked up. I haven't moved in yet, probably a month and a half away. Already hooked up to the city water and sewer, and I tried to apply for a well permit just for the irrigation only, because I've already tapped in. They had to go underneath the McCandlish Road, so it cost me a ton of money to get this done. So, talking to Jeff Sears, he said, well, we better check with the attorney. Our attorney got with their attorney, he said, the language is very vague. Even though you've hooked up to the city water and sewer, you've done what you're supposed to do, but the amendment is not specific enough. So we're going to grant it to you. And then a half hour later, they declined it, said, now it's got to go in front of the board. So I don't know if this is, because if I, just like that gentleman said, if I had to irrigate 3 acres with city water and sewer, it would cost me a ton of money. Like I joked with Mr. Sears before, I said my name would have to be Moseri to afford that. I can't do that. So that's what I want, I don't know if this is the time to talk about it or not.
Well, at this time, you can, we ask that you, limit your comments 3 minutes, and we are going to talk about it a little bit later in the agenda.
Okay, good,
but
good.
We have some other folks from Del Webb that are going to bring up the issue, and we're going to allow them to present some information. I don't know that we're going to have much discussion on tonight, but Thursday night we certainly will.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Okay, any other public comment? Okay, we will move back up to the board, and at this time we are going to have a board presentation with regard to our general fund and special revenue fund budgets by our superintendent and his staff. So, Mr. Lemata.
Thank you.
Are you guys so far away from me? We're right behind you. Thanks. What we'd like to do is, first off, thank you for giving us the opportunity to present the fiscal year 2020 budget. Thank you guys for giving us the opportunity for not only me, but the department heads who are really looking forward to this. We kind of ran through it earlier today. We've been working on it for a couple of weeks. They're going to try to take it as a top-line approach and walk you through each department and talk about it. We're going to cover the general fund, and we'll cover one of the special revenue funds, and that's building, because Mark was going to be here. We'd like to ask you if you would hold your questions until the end of the presentation, because we're going to try to get through it as quick as we can, and then we'll be wide open for questions as much as you want. On Thursday, we did put a spot on the agenda to talk about the budget, or wherever you guys would like to go. We can cover more of it this evening while all the department heads are here. If you want to select a few specific department heads to come back at a different time, if you want to select budget sessions, whatever, we're here to serve at your pleasure, however you want to walk through this.
So Dennis, or Mr. Lemata, this is meant to be an overview of the budget from each department head, and just kind of give us a snapshot.
Yeah, and if you guys will just indulge us a little bit, because we know that the public watches it, so we want to be able to do kind of a broader overview so that the public understands our goals and the logic behind our budgeting as well. So we'll briefly touch on that. We'll show you some historical data that shows where our revenue has been, where our expenses have been, and then we'll do kind of a brief department by department that will just tell you why the proposed fiscal year budget allows them to achieve the goals that they have set for themselves for the year.
Okay.
First off, requirements for our budgeting process. Formal budgeting is required for governmental entities. So sometimes that's a difference between private sector, public sector, when people have used to gone through budgets, is that governments have to do it. It's also legally binding. Once you guys are asked to approve that budget, it becomes a legally binding document. We have to stay within those amounts appropriated for each expenditure by category. If we are going to deviate it, the sooner we see deviations, I have to come to the board and let you know that there's a deviation from the budget, and we have to do a budget amendment so that we can move those expenditures appropriately. Without a budget, we don't have the authority to spend. So come January 1st, if the budget isn't approved, we don't have the authority to spend any money. Government budgets are revenue-based. They're used to allocate scarce resources among the competing demands and mandated services. The financial objective is to maximize service delivery to taxpayers. Our budget goals for 2020, and this is where we would ask that if we're not getting it right, here's the feedback that we really need from the board, is that if there's other areas that we need to focus on. First and foremost, this is the 5th budget that I've delivered to the Board of Trustees for Grand Blanc Township. Since I've been here and started, it's always been a maintenance budget. We want to maintain our current service levels without adding a lot of new programs. Again, to maximize and meet the service needs of our community. The second point is that any extra funding that we have should be used to go towards unfunded liabilities. And we can show you later, we have put additional money towards the pension plan as well as the retiree health care OPEB. We want to expand economic development opportunities where possible, like the DDA, and then budget for capital expenditures, like fire apparatus, which we are well aware that we learned we need to make sure we're setting aside money for that, and then the bicentennial park upgrades, as well as McFarland library upgrades, which were kind of new to us this year, and we're going to be asked you to consider some of those. The budget outlook for 2020. Hey guys, I'm happy to stand here and tell you for the 6th straight year, our SEV is up, our taxable value is up. That's an amazing thing because we had 6 years where it kept going in the wrong direction. We went down every year for 6 years after the 2007 year, and we're finally coming back. SEV's up 8%, taxable value's up over 5%, but challenges remain because our taxable value is still only 91% of where it was in 2007, and our costs continue to rise. The Headley rollbacks limit revenue from millage funds. Proposal A limits growth in taxable value for individual parcels unless they're sold and they uncap. So we've also seen Lansing balance their budget by challenging our personal property tax, veterans exemptions. Not that those things are good or bad, they may be really good, but it does impact our revenue stream. And of course, state revenue sharing payments. They're down $11.5 million between 2003 and 2017, had they stayed on the trajectory that they were on before 2003.
That's 11 million to us.
Exactly.
Not overall, that's just us.
To Grand Blanc Township. So I threw this slide up there just to show the difference in what happens with state equalized value and the taxable value. When we look at that bottom line as taxable value, when the recession hit in 2007, you can see the drop. Like I said, we had 6 years of declines before we started coming back up. The SEV starts to come back up, so your state equalized value, your appraised value, your true cash value of your property begins to increase after the recession. Property prices start to stabilize. But the taxable value, which is where we get our money from, our millage is driven by that taxable value, it's going to increase much, much slower because unless a property uncaps, they can drop overnight. If your property lost 30% of its value, it drops overnight 30%. But to get it back, we can only grow at 5% or rate of inflation, whichever is lower. And so typically we've been growing it from an inflation standpoint at less than 2% per year. It takes a long time to get that revenue stream back up again. That's important because if you look at our property tax revenue, which is our #1 source of revenue, and again, revenue-based budget, our #1 source of revenue is property tax. Take a look at where we were in 2007, take a look at where we are today. We lost that drop, we're trying to claw our way back up. So it would look like if we lost that much revenue, and we lost this much revenue sharing, again, the line on top was full funding. That's where it should have been before they started making cuts, and had it continued that trajectory for the revenue sharing, $11.5 million more dollars in that 12-year period, we could have done a lot of things for the township. So our general fund expenditures. What's different with our general fund expenditures? You saw that our revenues dropped precipitously, and I talked about, man, what are we going to do? I think this is an important slide to note that we froze wages for 4 years. We said, man, the recession hit, we have to do something, we need some concessions. So we're going to ask employees to take a wage freeze, which they did. Then we finally, after that 4 years, started to then move that back up in the last couple of bargaining sessions, like, okay, let's work through this. Now you're seeing an increase in those general fund expenditures. What is the increase? It's not that we're doing new programs, we didn't start new services, we didn't start new departments. It's because we spent $4.7 million on unfunded OPEB retirement liabilities and over $1 million extra to the police pension fund. We've done what we said we were going to do. We continue to contain costs. We continue to maintain the excellent services to our residents. And the only increase in expenditures really comes at the expense of going after those unfunded liabilities. We're a statutory government entity. We have mandated functions that we have to do. The state constitution charges the legislature with determining the powers of townships. And we have mandated functions which are tax collection, property assessment, and elections administration. Those are the only three things as a government that you absolutely have to do. You're required by law to do these. Discretionary functions, fire protection, police services, planning, zoning, parks and recreation, libraries, seniors, mosquitoes, road maintenance, cemeteries, public water and sewer. Those are all things that you don't have to do, but those are the things that create the sense of place. Those are the things that make Grand Blanc Township different from the municipalities around us. Those are the things that make people choose to live here versus somewhere else. And that brings our housing values up. It brings in more tax revenue. These are the things that people want to see us have. So every year we go through this in July, we send out worksheets and we tell the department heads, we really need your participation, we need you to look back historically, and we need you to determine how are you going to deliver the service that we're required to deliver within the amount of revenue that we believe we have. So it starts in July, we start meeting with them. We have to deliver it by September 1st, no later. That's required by law. The board gets the budget, and then we start to work on it. You do have to approve that budget no later than December 31st, 2019, or come 1/1/2020. We don't have any authorization to spend. This is just a big eye chart for everybody, an overview of the summary. This is the first page in the budget packet that you get that talks about revenues and expenditures by cost center. And when you approve the budget, you approve it by cost center. We don't, even though we have a line item budget, we don't go and approve it line by line by line. We approve it by cost center. For example, legislative board, $226,792. You look at the difference in the budget from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. $16.9 million. Wow, that's a big increase in what's going on with our revenue and expenditures. Where's that money? What's causing that? What's driving it? OPEB. We booked $1.6 million for OPEB, $1.2 million for OPEB this year. Also in there for public services, there's $600,000 for the Grand Wailea Road project that's booked in there. Because again, this covers all of those special assessments, lighting districts, road projects. So when we do these, it's anticipated in 2020 that you will approve that Grand Wailea special assessment district for road repaving. So really the biggest differences that you see, there's some change here and there. We brought the fire department on board this year. They didn't used to be. We ran that money through the fire commission. Now we're doing that as an in-house department. But the big difference you're seeing here is, again, our aggressive stance on how to pay down unfunded liabilities, because I believe that's what you guys have charged us with, and that's what we're trying to deliver. I'm going to turn it over to Finance Director Kathy Sostak next. She'll kind of walk you through the finance budget and how her proposed fiscal year 2020 budget will help her achieve her goals. Kathy?
Good evening.
Thank you. Good evening. The primary function of any finance department within a service organization is to account for revenues and expenditures to ensure that the organization is spending its limited resources wisely. The finance department is not a capital-intensive department by any means. It's primarily labor-intensive. And as a result, the majority of the finance department expenditures are labor costs. And that's very similar to many other departments in this organization. The responsibilities and services that we provide as the finance department include financial reporting, budget preparation. We oversee the annual audit. We do the state reporting. Many of these reports are required in order for us to receive the revenue sharing. If we don't submit the reports, they'll withhold our revenue sharing. We also record financial transactions. We do bank account reconciliation. maintenance of all the assets within the township. We maintain the records of the assets. And then we do the accounts payable function. This year, the budget additions, we primarily have a maintenance budget this year. The only addition we have to the budget is, and this is required every other year, that we do a retiree health care evaluation. It's required by GASB, and 2020 is a year we'll need to have a new one performed. The other thing that we're looking to do this year is to implement the purchase order and a paperless accounts payable system. Right now, we, departments bring physical requests for payment to our department. We would like to have that all done electronically, so that we feel that it would be a savings in duplication of work, and will also less storage. Right now, we have a couple file cabinets every year of accounts payable records. The cost reductions or increased efficiencies that we've seen over the last few years. Prior to my starting here, there were actually 5 employees within the finance department. Then it was reduced down to 4, and 4 employees and a part-time, and right now we're currently at 3 employees. For the last 3 years we've had 3, and we're still able to maintain and maintain the functions that we've done in the past. We've also combined bank accounts so that we were able to reduce fees and administrative costs. Several of the functions that were previously performed by the auditors at the end of the year, a lot of the schedules and adjusting entries, we are now doing that all in-house. We also encourage ACH transactions and payments wherever possible. It's less expensive and less time-consuming. And then, of course, as the finance department, we're always looking to for better cost alternatives or options, especially like with supply purchases. We always shop the best supplier, and we're actually able to, as an example, one of the things we did this year, there were always 3-part forms ordered for time off requests, and those are actually quite costly. So now we've developed an electronic way of doing that, so we're able to eliminate that cost. So we've reduced the operating expenditures within the finance department by several $1,000s. To sum it up, the goal of the finance department is to accurately present, in accordance with general accepted accounting principles, the results of Grand Blanc Township's financial operations and conditions in a timely manner to all interested parties. This budget that we presented for 2020 in the finance department provides the necessary funding to accomplish the mandated financial services in compliance with all the state and governmental accounting standards. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the superintendent to present his budget.
Thank you, Ms. Sostak.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, just sit here. We'll do it.
Mr. Lehman, can you push the microphone forward a little bit more towards you, so that whoever comes, there you go. I think it'll pick up a little better.
Okay. So really, what do I do in my department? Provide operational oversight for all township departments, obviously. It's a 3-person department. It's me, the administrative assistant, and the human resource generalist. The reason I bring this up is because the human resources department is new. We created that 3 years ago when we brought HR generalist Colleen Nedzwicki on board, and it's been a critical part of our process when we run a $35 million enterprise to have a human resources department for that benefits administration, plus to make sure that we stay legally compliant with a lot of things. And I will bring Colleen up shortly, and she can kind of walk you through the creation of her department and how we've come through there. But really, the last proactive changes to reduce costs, we saved $240,000 annually by doing some negotiations to our retiree health care. That was not on the backs of the retirees. I want to be very quick to point out that $240,000 annual savings actually gave them an improved level of benefits, but we had the savings through negotiations. We negotiated changes to the OPEB strategy. Again, the employees were great in the contract talks 3 years ago, everybody agreeing to make some changes to retiree health care. We've eliminated it. For all new hires, we've got retirees paying in retirement for the first time. We've done some, and obviously the policies and our focus of budget on paying down unfunded liabilities has been huge. We've obviously negotiated service contracts on a routine basis. But we've also been proactive in personnel management and contract administration, and that saves an incredible amount of money from having to deal with grievances and lawsuits, which we used to do a lot of, which are almost non-existent today because of the level of trust and the professionalism in our personnel management. We've also, the goal of our department is to really maximize service delivery. You'll hear that over and over. What's the job that we take seriously every day? Maximize service delivery to taxpayers through efficient oversight of all operations. This budget will allow us to accomplish those goals. And I would like to bring up Colleen Nedzwicki this evening and just introduce you to your human resource generalist and let people know that why it was so important we felt to create that human resources department.
Good evening.
Good evening.
In 2016, the human resources position was established by the township, and at that time I came on board. Since then, the HR has grown vastly in the township. There are many aspects to the human resources department. However, some of the key components that I'll touch on is to maintain compliance with employment laws on the federal and state level, along with civil rights laws and payroll laws. We also administer the benefits and provide an excellent benefit package to our employees while trying to contain cost. Develop training programs with departments, encourage continuing education, streamline processes to be more efficient. I assist in negotiations and working with the unions, developing that trust, that relationship. Some of the ways that we've reduced cost and maintained is by streamlining the payroll process. I'm a little nervous. Continue to seek cost savings benefits for retiree health care, as Superintendent Lemus has said, and workers' compensation. In addition, this year we split a couple employees between two departments instead of hiring a part-time worker. This way we were able to save cost there, reducing recruitment, employment cost, and etc. The main goal of my department is to stay compliant, to limit liability for the township, and to provide customer service to the Grand Blanc Township employees. Thank you, and it is Becky Salvati, the assessor, next.
Thanks. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm here to let you know what our responsibilities are in the assessing department, and I chose the 4 parts that affect the revenue stream. We pick up all the new construction in the township annually. That's usually over 600 permits that we're going out on every year. We'll be picking up Magna this year. We also have Banbury Commons is complete for the most part. These are huge, going to be huge to our revenue stream next year. We set the ECF in over 200 neighborhoods. Our SEV is going up 6% next year, and it's our job to spread that 6% into the various neighborhoods. One might be going up 3 or 4%, while another one might be going up 10%. Overall, we have to be at 6%, but it's our job to spread it where it's needed. We also re-inspect 20% of the assessment roll. This is huge. It's 2,800 parcels annually. So far, we're not done yet, but we've picked up $8.7 million to add to the roll for next year. That equates to about $40,000 to the general fund. Also, when we record deeds and there's uncappings, and we go through the sales, to make sure that we have everything on that property. So that's part of that $8.7 million that we've got. We've had a few additions in our 2020 budget. We have a mandated border review member training. We annually have to send our border review members for training now. We were sending them every other year, and the state's mandated it will happen every year now. Our commercial industrial has risen to a level that we need an MMAO, so we're going to try to contract with a level 4 assessor to do our consumers energy so that we can stay at the level 3 for another year. We have 2 employees in our offices that are in classes to become MMAOs, and we're hoping that they both make it through. But at this point, they're not certified at that level. I put 2 laptops for training purposes in here. It's easier for me to show people stuff if I can stand between 2 people and show them rather than standing in the big room and having to run from desk to see if they're doing the proper thing. Also, as people go out for classes now, quite often they're asked to bring laptops to the training sessions, so that was an expense. The way we've become more efficient or reduced costs, we no longer send out the personal property statements to small businesses. Before, we were sending out the personal property statement, they were sending it back in with a big fat 0 on it, so all we were doing was spending money for nothing. But the state eliminated that finally. We now have we've had tablets in our department for about 3 years now, and it makes them more efficient out in the field. I mean, they have the most current information. They're talking, you know, if the homeowner asks a question, they've got the information right there to answer it. It used to be you had to scratch their number on a piece of paper and tell them you'd call them back when you got in the office. They're able to take their pictures and download them immediately. They don't have to come back in and download them into the computer. And we are looking for local classes to take rather than, we used to go out to training for a week and stay at a hotel somewhere. And we are looking more for one-day classes that are local that we can save money that way. And the people that are going away for training are normally the ones that are trying to get certified to the next level. Our goal is always to maximize services to the residents of the community, and we're always mindful of budget restraints. This budget allows us to meet our state mandated requirements. Everything we do is state mandated. We don't have a lot of fluff. All right, what do I do now here?
Push that.
Thanks, Ms.
Rodney
Salvati.
Feller is not here, so Dennis is going to run through.
So I'll try to be as brief as possible since the whole GIS IT thing, mostly I just need that stuff to work when I need it to work, and that's what I know about it. However, I know about the budget. GIS, realistically, when people think GIS department, what does it do? GIS drives everything we do here, from DPW to assessing to when we create special assessment districts. It's our mapping, it's our everything. We know where our water and sewer lines are. We know where the shutoffs are. We use GIS. Every single department uses GIS. It's critical to our operations, and we have, we're lucky we have 2 people that are really well trained in GIS. As far as IT goes, you've heard her talk about her tablets. You're gonna, we added tablets to the police department because we used to have guys sitting in court time who might be tied up in court for 4 hours and did nothing, couldn't do any reports. So we gave them tablets so that they can actually do the reports while they're there instead of us paying them to sit there for 4 hours, then have to come back to the office and do their reporting then. More efficient, it helps us. Instead of adding to the head count, we've added to our technology. We're going to do it with a proposal for next year is for the building department, that we want to get them on so that they can do some electronic stuff before they go from a permitting process and getting out there. Anytime that we can do something that makes us more efficient, it makes us more customer friendly, we can maximize service delivery, that's what we're trying to do. Right now I'm undergoing an IT assessment, and we got RFPs out and we're waiting for those to come back in. I'll bring it to the board once we know what it is. I'm asking for firms to come in and take a good hard look at our personnel count, our training. Do we have the right people? Are we prepared to meet the demands of the future? You guys are well aware with IT that what works today can be outdated 6 months from now. We're trying to develop a long-range plan for IT, and we think that this budget allows us to look at that. What I present for the budget for 2020 could be vastly different in 2021 based on the outcome of that assessment. I can tell you that we probably are looking at making some type of changes in the GIS IT department, but how drastic those will be, we just know that we need, the more technology driven we become, The more efficient we are, the better customer service we give. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to DPW Director Jeff Sears, who does work through our building and grounds and our public services budgets as part of his role.
Good evening.
Thank you, Dennis. Good evening. The building and grounds budget is used primarily to maintain Township Hall and the main township campus. These funds pay for specifically energy costs here in Township Hall. They also pay for contractual services such as mowing the campus, weed control, cleaning of this building. It also pays for building maintenance and repairs such as replacing light bulbs, right on up to leaky roofs, anything we have to do to keep this building going. Our 2020 budget is pretty much a maintenance budget. The only changes that are proposed are some smaller maintenance projects that would have qualified as capital improvement projects, but we changed the threshold on those because they're lower cost. They're operational projects now. One of them is some parking lot maintenance out here, some sealing and striping. The other is just some tree trimming and landscaping that we're going to be doing. Over the past several years, you probably have noticed a change in the building. We've been working pretty hard to update this building. We're going to be here for a long time. It's an old building, but for right now it suits our needs. So we have been working on replacing carpet, painting walls. Some of the big things that we've done to save costs is change out to LED light bulbs. We're about 75% done. There's only a few rooms left, including this one, that we do need to do a change out program. We've also recently installed a smart thermostat system on the HVAC system. So I can control it from my office. My assistant director control it. It's all on a program now. We adjust the program seasonally. And this is so that we don't have people going and turning the heat up and turning the air conditioning down every single day. That really drives up our energy costs. And we have seen a cost savings with that. Things such as renegotiating our service contracts, going out for bid on cleaning services, we've done all that to try and maximize our budget and to continue to keep this building going for as long as we possibly can with the dollars we have. The public services budget is a little bit different. This is money spent out in the community where really it affects residents the most. This is the money that we put in our 50-50 funds that we discuss every year with the road commission to repave roads. This money is in that budget. Also, we pay special assessments for drainage projects to the Genesee County Drain Commission. We have a lot of open ditch drains in our township. Whenever they have to do any kind of significant maintenance for it, they charge us for it, they charge the residents for it. So that's included in this budget, along with snow removal, mosquito spraying, other things like pathway maintenance, cemetery maintenance, and then our joint contributions to the library and Parks and Recreation are also included in this budget. As Dennis mentioned earlier, the large increase you'll see in your budget this year is the addition of the Grand Wailea repaving district. That was approved by the board recently, and that's getting ready to go in for design at the road commission level right now. So hopefully in the spring you'll see that project going. That's really going to enhance that subdivision quite a bit. Obviously that cost is paid back to us through the residents through a special assessment district. Really over the past few years, since Dennis and I have really gotten involved with the 50-50 program, we've been working with the road commission to best utilize this money. It's a good chunk of change. Our funding's been increased, and it's just really made us think harder and look at our road system in more depth so that we know we're spending the money wisely and that we're addressing the community's needs the best we possibly can. And with that, I will let Chief Wiles come up here and speak to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sears. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. How's everybody?
Good.
Thank you. First of all, it is a privilege to provide police services to the residents of Grand Blanc Township. But with that privilege comes great responsibility, obviously. We are well aware that the police department is the lion's share of the general budget here for the township, general fund budget. And we take that responsibility very seriously. From myself to the bottom of our organization, we are well aware of that. Most of our authority comes by statute. You know, when you think of law enforcement, you think of protect and serve. The protect aspect of that all comes from statute primarily. The service aspect is what we forget about a lot of times, and that's what we do better than most agencies. That's where we gain our trust and support from our communities, from that service aspect. We have a responsibility to provide or safeguard lives and property. We have a responsibility to keep the peace and ensure the rights of all to liberty, equality, and justice. However, we do all that while maintaining trust, building relationships with the community that we serve, whether those are residents, people passing through, or people that come here to work on a daily basis. Some of the things that you will see in the budget for next year changes is a small change in the community outreach. We do a lot of community outreach, whether it's National Night Out, where we have thousands of people come to the police department to spend time with some of our officers, our Coffee with a Cop, our Cookies with a Cop, our Citizens Police Academy, our Crime Prevention Unit, our numerous presentations to homeowners associations. All of those things fall under community outreach and is very important to the success that we've had as an organization. Rule number one of any successful organization is hire good people. Back in 2008, we were approved for 48 sworn officers. Today we're approved for 43. So literally, we are doing more with less. Those 5 officers that we were approved for, 5 additional officers we were approved for in 2008, have been off the books for some time now. And we've tried to create innovative programs, be creative in our budgeting to provide that superior level of service that we strive for each and every day. A couple other of the additions you'll see on there: uniform expense, vehicle maintenance and repair expense. Those come with the territory. Prices go up on vehicle equipment, and vehicles, they break down, they have problems, you got to fix them. We're lucky enough to have a couple outstanding mechanics in our in-house fleet here that keep those costs to a minimum, but prices go up. Uniforms wear out. You've all seen officers, the belts, all the leather gear, their uniforms, they're expensive to replace. And unfortunately, to keep that professional appearance that we require of our officers, we got to replace those uniforms occasionally. A couple areas you'll see where in the budget where it is we've saved some funding. The leased vehicle program. We tried that a couple years ago. It served its purpose, but we were getting out of leased vehicles. As a result of that, that's approximate savings of about $9,500. Legal fees. Significant savings there of about $17,000. Primarily because you don't see many lawsuits against the police department. That's a credit to the training and the professionalism of our officers. You don't see any grievances from our officers against our administration. That's an aspect of the trust that we have and they have with us, with the unions and the administration at the police department. Small savings in computer supplies are about $2,500. IT drives what we do, just like every other department. But we've been innovative and tried to do things unique to save a little bit of money in that area as well. Some of the proactive things we do to reduce costs, Superintendent Lehman touched on contract negotiations in 2016. That was a total department buy-in. You know, every unit, we have 3 unions in the police department, they all bought into that to try to help with the problems that we face financially. As you know, Allied Challenge, we've had it for 2 years here now. They just signed a 5-year extension. In year 1, they agreed to reimburse us $12,000. In year 2, we went back and had a conversation with them, and they agreed to reimburse us $25,000. So significant additional funding for that, for reimbursement of our officers at that event. Our kids and the schools in the Grand Blanc area, they're important. They're important to the future of not only Grand Blanc Township, but society in general. As you know, the 2 middle schools reside in Grand Blanc Township, and we have an SRO assigned to each middle school. We have an agreement with the schools where in 2017, 2018, they were reimbursing $30,000 per SRO for $60,000 total. So I sat down with Superintendent Garner and we renegotiated that. Starting in 2020, 2021, they're going to be reimbursing $40,000 per officer for a total of $80,000 or additional $20,000. So those are some of the innovative things we've tried to do to proactively reduce the cost in the organization. Lastly, officer safety is hugely important. All our officers are trained and certified in TASER. A couple years ago, all our TASER replacements were done through capital projects. There was $10,000 in our capital project Through talking with Taser International, working with them, we developed a program to spend $5,200 a year for every 5 years, and we get new tasers every 5 years. That keeps all the tasers in warranty. That brings us cartridges, brings us holsters, brings us training cartridges to keep our officers with the latest, greatest equipment at a much less price than what we were spending in that. So we've also improved service without improving cost. And that's been a challenge. But we have a group of dedicated individuals over there who are willing to do that. A couple of things we've done: grant participation, whether it's through Office of Highway Safety Planning with OWI, seatbelt, youth alcohol, the ballistic vest that all our officers are required to wear. That's a 50-50 grant with Department of Justice. The accreditation program. We're one of 19 agencies in the state of Michigan to become accredited. 105 voluntary compliance with 105 standards, best practice standards in law enforcement to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of our department. Strengthening partnerships through innovative programs, Citizens Police Academy, Crime Prevention Unit, those types of programs are vital, and officer training. I mentioned the small increase that I was asking for the training. Our officers, they receive training second to none. We're the only department in this area that all our officers are SFST and A-RIDE certified. We have 3 DREs, 2 DRE instructors. You won't see that in Genesee County. Fair and impartial policing, that's a cultural competency program. All of our officers have been to that, so we can best serve all of our residents, whether you live here, work here, or passing through here. And mental health first aid. Mental health, there's a crisis in our country, and that spreads to Grand Blanc Township as well. All of our officers are trained in mental health first aid so they can effectively deal with those people that we come in contact with that may have some sort of mental illness. And lastly, it is our goal to deliver a superior level of service to our residents. Maintain and build strong community partnerships, uphold the highest ethical standards, provide a safe environment, of course. And thankfully, with the board's support in the past, and I would anticipate in the future, this budget that is proposed and sits before you today would allow us to maintain those goals and provide that superior level of service that we strive for each and every day. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
With that, Chief Bob Burdett from the Fire Department.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Good evening, Chief Burdett.
Good evening. Thank you, Chief Wiles, and thank you for the board for having us here this evening. As Superintendent Limita mentioned earlier, the major increase in the 2020 proposed budget is the fire department being brought on board as a department within the township. We recognize that, and we don't take that lightly. You are already aware that the fire department is responsible for providing fire suppression services, fire safety inspections, site plan review for safety, and investigates fire cause and origin. Many of you may not be aware that in addition to that, we also do a lot of community services, such as public education on fire safety, child safety seat installation, smoke and carbon monoxide installation, just to mention a few. Our proposed 2020 budget is based on maintaining the present level of services to our residents that are provided today. The $50,000 asked for will allow us to replace equipment that has become outdated, such as protective clothing, hose, and allow the purchase of some necessary equipment for our new ladder truck that's coming in March. We've maximized our services, some of the services in 2019, such as implementation of a cloud-based incident reporting system. This allows firefighters to be on scene to start an incident report, and when we're out in the field doing fire safety inspections, we're able to gather that information immediately, and that is now into the computer system, so any firefighter, when we respond to a call just minutes after the inspection is done, we already have updated information on that incident, or that any hazards found in that business. We continue to look for alternative sources of funding to purchase fire alarms installation. In 2019, a grant was submitted and we received from the state of Michigan to provide smoke and carbon monoxide alarms to our residents. Over 141 smoke alarms and carbon monoxide, or smoke and carbon monoxide detectors were installed in 55 residents in our community last year. The budget allows us for enough funds to provide continuing education for the firefighters and purchase those items necessary for us to maintain compliance with national standards. Lastly, the department is looking towards our future needs by creating a 5-year long-range plan to address the future community needs with a focus on improving response times and reducing risk to our community. The proposed budget allows for the fire department to continue meeting our present community needs. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Mark Lloyd, our planning director for the township. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening, Mr. Lloyd.
Good evening, folks. Thanks for the opportunity to come here. Believe it or not, this is an exciting time for me. I enjoy budgeting, and so appreciate the opportunity to come before you. It really does give us a chance to take a look at what we're doing and how we might make improvements and do things a little better, and I think that's what we've got for you. So within the Planning and Building Department, we're responsible for planning and zoning activities, community economic development, plumbing, building, mechanical, electrical inspections, and permitting. Also site permitting and inspections, environmental compliance, code enforcement, and historic preservation. This year's budget is pretty straightforward. We have been able to reduce a number of our expenditures, one of them being expenditure for consultants, $30,900. We did increase an expenditure of $1,000 for furniture and equipment, so the balance there is a savings of about $29,900, but we don't need the same amount of assistance as we've needed in the past. We have an increase in revenue of $2,000 for site plans, and with building department we have a considerable increase in revenues, about $155,000 total between building permits, plumbing permits, and code enforcement activities. So that number has jumped, and we've taken that into consideration. In addition to that, we've also managed to keep a handle on this budget by being a bit creative in regards to how we're utilizing and expending the funds. It's an appropriate expenditure of funds given the fact that the director is responsible for building and planning, to utilize that building fund for 50% of those costs. We also do that with a couple of the other employees who are also providing services for the building department, and in a total of that, we save about $76,000 a year. So far, in this year, and since I've been here, we've been operating under a similar budget that we had in the past, and we've been able to do a lot of things in addition to what we've been able to do in the past. And one of them, a primary benefit to this, has been to give our turnaround time for project reviews and approvals a considerable boost. In other words, what we can do now in about maybe a month, it was taking us several months to do in the past, and that's simply a matter of communication and moving our projects further, and frankly having somebody here all the time on board to help with that. So we've been able to do a lot to help with that. All of our reviews are done in-house. In other words, we don't contract for any of our reviews to be sent out for plan review, site plan review, whatever the case is. We look at all the projects in-house, we review all them in-house, we write up the reports in-house, and we present them. And you also likely know that in the Planning and Building Department, we have the Planning Commission, we have the Zoning Board of Appeals, we have the Building Board of Appeals, and we have the Historic District Commission. So we also provide support for all those different boards and commissions with this budget. And our goal is, like everybody else's this year, is to continue to provide great service. I can tell you this much, I've only been here for a couple of years, but the one thing that's been stressed to me and emphasized by the person on my left, your right, is customer service, customer service, customer service. And frankly, one of the reasons I'm here is because that's one of the things that was expected. And I take a great deal of pride in providing good quality customer service and getting that kind of feedback, making sure that the folks in my department do the same. And it's been a great experience for me, because everybody here that I've met, not only are we doing a great job providing services to the community, the development community and others who come in, but internally, we do a great job of providing service for each other. Everybody in this room who's talked to you tonight, when it comes time for somebody to help somebody, it's always there. I mean, this group of people and the leadership has been very, very helpful. So this year, we're going to be able to provide the necessary services that we've been able to provide in the past. We're going to be able to enhance them a bit through technology. And we're maintaining a good, solid budget for you this year. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Lloyd.
So I really do appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to talk to you. It wasn't like the department heads were reluctant about appearing here tonight. They actually embraced this idea of being able to put the presentation together and walk you through it, trying to give you more of a 10,000-foot view than going down a line-by-line item. At this point, though, again, we walked through the process. You heard what they had to say about their narratives about their budgets, and now it's time to move forward. So we can either do Q&A right now. We're prepared to answer any questions you might have. On Thursday, you actually do on your agenda have a time slotted for any other discussion on the budget. As you look through your budget packet, you see the department head's requests, you see my recommended budget to the board, and then the next steps are for where you guys want to move us. So if you'd like to select additional meeting dates, if you'd like to, however you want to move it forward, you just need to let us know and we're prepared to move forward.
What I'd like to do at this point, Mr. Limita, is first of all, thanks for, I'm sorry, Mr. Thomas? At this time, what I'd like to do is to go through, first of all, thank you to all the department heads for the presentation and the information that you put together. But what I'd like to do is just get some clarification from the board in terms of any questions or clarifications from the department heads. In terms of talking about what our next steps are, I'd like to wait till Thursday maybe to have a full-blown discussion on where we go on that. But at this time, since we have the department heads here, what I'd like to utilize their time to do is to clarify any questions that may have come up from their presentation. And then we have them here to respond. But then on Thursday, we'll talk a little bit more. I would entertain anyways on Thursday, we talk about what our next steps are. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I have some clarification that I'd like for the chief to respond to.
Police chief or fire
Police
chief?
chief. Sorry. Police chief, Wiles.
Got him several weeks ago.
No change. One thing I thought I heard, and I liked what I thought I heard, okay, that you have reduced head count over the years. Didn't you say that?
Well, we are currently budgeted for less today than we were in 2008, but that wasn't through any layoff or forced reduction. We had retirements during that time. We had people that maybe had left the department previously, and those positions were never filled, primarily because of the difficult financial times across the country going through those years.
So the same as reducing headcount?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question. Not for Chief Wise, but for the finance director.
Chief, I've got a question while you're up there.
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Yes, sir.
Through Supervisor Bennett to Chief Wiles, you said that we went from 48 to 43 officers, road officers.
Yep.
What is the command staff, sergeants included? What's the number of them compared to what it was when you were comparing the 48 officers?
Yeah, the 48 number and the 43 number are top-down sworn officers.
Okay.
I can tell you today my command staff is myself, I have a captain.
So the 48 and 43 is including yourself?
Yep, that's everybody,
Okay.
from the chief down. I wasn't chief in 2008, but.
I know.
So yeah, top down, that's what those numbers are. Today it is myself, captain, 2 lieutenants,
Okay.
6 sergeants.
And we had,
And previously we had the chief, 2 captains, 2 lieutenants, an inspector. 6 sergeants, and I didn't go down to the detective bureau. We had additional detectives previously as well. I have 3 detectives right now and a detective sergeant.
we had 4 back in the way,
Correct.
right? What about your dispatchers?
Dispatchers, we've always run 24/7 up there.
Okay,
Currently,
what's the number?
I have 5 full-time radio operators / clerks right now up there, and 7 part-time that fill in for vacations, that kind of stuff. Previously, this is going way back, we had 3, then we bumped up to 4, so I want to say 3 in 2008, up to 5 now.
Then, okay.
So, I'll just continue. So again, a total head count, including command staff, dispatchers, all the rest of that.
Yep.
Today?
Sworn officers, 43.
Yep.
7 full-time civilian employees, that's 5 clerical, 1 evidence technician, and then my assistant, and 7 part-time radio operators / clerks.
So the 5 full-time dispatchers were included in the 7?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Wiles?
No questions from me from Chief Wise, but I have a question
Okay.
I had two questions,
Thanks,
and I was
Chief.
interrupted.
Okay, well, while we have Chief up here, though, we might as well finish with Chief Wiles. Was that acceptable? We
Yes,
just, okay, I've got a couple for you, Chief. So, in terms of service level that we provide, are we providing, you know, like, one of the things I think that's popular with our residents is the vacation checks. And I don't know if you know this, but is that something that other police departments around here provide, or is that something unique to Grand Blanc Township?
That is not a service unique to Grand Blanc Township. There are other departments that do it. I can tell you locally, there are probably not many police departments that do as many as we do, especially during the winter months. You know, we have a portion of our residents in the south end of the community that, I guess all over for that matter, but primarily the south end, who leave the state for the winter months. And it is not uncommon in the winter for us to have over 400 vacation checks that we do. And that's a lot of vacation checks. And those are done every 5 days throughout until they return.
The volume of calls that the dispatch has been receiving, has that been increasing over time or decreasing or staying
That's
even?
actually remained pretty steady. What we've seen as a decrease, though, is the crime rate in Grand Blanc Township, which is really a credit to the men and women out there doing it every day, and these programs that we've tried to institute to raise awareness in our crime prevention efforts.
I think you told us what the call volume is, either annually or per month. Can you
Sure.
remind me?
We respond to about 20,000 calls for service. Now, that is different than a call into the agency. Calls for service is someone calls in, I need an officer, we send an officer. That's a call for service. Our radio operators / clerks in-house in Grand Blanc Township take about 60,000 radio calls. Now, that could be someone calling to sign up for a vacation check, could be someone calling to sign up for a senior citizen call-in, could be someone calling just to ask a question, is a road closed? Those aren't technically calls for service, but they're calls that come into our agency that are answered by our personnel.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Massey, you had another question for one of our
yes,
department heads.
the finance director. Finance director, my question to you, if I heard you correctly, I think you said that you have reduced headcount in finance. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Back in, I believe it was 2013, there were 5 individuals in the department, and currently we have 3.
Is that something you do on a yearly basis, look at reducing the headcount if it's necessary?
If it was necessary, yes. I mean, I don't think we can go reduce down any further. I think we're only able to achieve that by, well, first of all, I have to give a lot of credit to my qualified staff. I think they have great qualifications. And also just the efficiencies that we've achieved in the department. And also back in, it was 15 or 16, I had a payroll coordinator in my department. When she retired, the position was replaced with the HR generalist. So the payroll function went over to the superintendent's department. However, my department, one individual on my staff still is the backup for payroll and assists with payroll though too.
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Sostat? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I do have a question
Okay.
for, I believe, Superintendent. Yes, Superintendent. My question to you, if I heard you correctly, reduced employees' health care costs. You said about $240,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a question, Mr. Limita. I don't know, off the top of your head, what percentage of our budget, I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, percentage of our budget is for wages and benefits?
I don't know the number. I mean,
It's a large portion though.
Yeah, I mean, over 60%, probably 70%. I mean, we're here to provide service, and we do that with the head count. Although when you look at it, like I said, where we've been and what you heard tonight, technology, we've taken advantage of technology to make sure that we're not adding to the payroll. People are expensive.
One of the things I noticed on the list was that cemetery management was a discretionary activity, right? So if we didn't take care of it, where would, I mean, because if a cemetery goes out of business basically, and we end up with the state saying, hey, you got to take this over, who would take care of it then if we didn't?
So that's a great question, Supervisor Bennett, because it's a point of contention between us, the county, the Michigan Township Association, certainly working on the forefront of this. Right now, when somebody walks away from a cemetery, and unfortunately, they get the cemetery when they're selling all the plots and making money, and then all of a sudden, most of those are sold out, and then they walk away, they siphon all the money off, and it just gets turned over to the local municipality, which unfortunately turns out to be us, and why we have the cemeteries that we have. You don't really pick up necessarily a budget to fund any improvements or repairs or maintenance. You just get it. And it's always been a general belief that we're required. But what happens if we couldn't? What happens if financially we can't do it? And that's one of the things that the Michigan Township Association is currently working on with the state, is saying it's really unfair because we've got we've got some large cemeteries in the township here, and if they were to fail for whatever reason and land on our shoulders, we're sitting here talking about, hey, we can put $1.6 million on OPEB. That could change in a hurry if suddenly we're forced to do perpetual care at a cemetery that we don't have the opportunity to gain any revenue from it any longer. So,
well, I can say that's an area that I would like to spend a little bit of time, not obviously this evening, but if we're going to look deeper in the budget, one of the things I would like to look at is our cemetery management and what we're charging, how many plots a year. If we end up taking over more cemeteries, what that looks like. But I want to make sure we're not upside down currently in that area.
And we could do that. Clerk Lane obviously is in charge of selling cemetery plots, doing that. She works with GIS on mapping to make sure that we know ones are available, which ones are not available or full. Jeff Sears obviously has a tremendous amount of experience, and he's got some background in cemeteries. He's a guy who gets pulled in to assist in all those. You'll note that we didn't have the clerk and treasurer's budget through this presentation, obviously because they're board members, and we think you can get your questions answered in a much easier way, in a much easier format than having the clerk or treasurer come and stand before you. But one of those things that's a great conversation to have, and I think certainly Clerk Lane and Jeff Sears will be happy to explore that further.
Okay. Mr. Matt?
Just one more, following on the cemetery, if you were finished with that. So it does seem like it's somehow not right for someone to walk away, siphon money off of a cemetery, and then kind of leave the responsibility with us. I guess I would, if that were to occur again, I guess I would try and pursue whatever legal measures back and to go back to try and claw back whatever there would be. But looking at where we are with cemeteries in the township now, do we take a look at what kind of risk we may be under to, having to absorb like an evergreen or, one of the other ones? Do we proactively look at that?
So, the answer unfortunately is no. We haven't looked at some of these bigger cemeteries and said, what does that look like for us and what would happen? The ones that we do have are smaller, and we absorbed those long before I got here. There are some that had some funding behind them, which it's really not a lot. I mean, there's some revenue attached to it, but it's not enough for perpetual care, obviously. We're relatively lucky, knock on wood, that we have smaller cemeteries at this point that have a manageable budget. We basically get out there and make sure they're mowed. We have the trees cleaned up and that. It would be a whole new animal, Trustee Mansour, for us to take on something of the size of one of the bigger ones like you mentioned. I think we would absolutely have to work with our legislatures and whoever else to make sure that we don't end up with this huge unfunded mandate, because it would be a burden. It would be a financial burden, and yet you also are respectful of the folks who have relatives out in those cemeteries as well, and you want to make sure that that care is there, but hard for us to pick up and absorb.
I'm just trying to get a feel for if we, have some way to assess the health of those the places, just to
like financially.
Financially, yeah, exactly right.
Well, here's part of the dilemma, and the reason why I asked the question is that currently the legislation, if the cemetery belongs to a religious organization, the reporting is quite scant, and so to assess the health of those particular cemeteries is very difficult even for the state to investigate. So it's been in the media lately, and I just want to make sure that the cemeteries we have currently that we're managing well, So in the event that we get into that business even bigger, we know a little bit more about where we're at currently. Mr. Thomas.
Superintendent Limita, you said that the clerk is working with our DPW director with the cemeteries. Is that a statutory duty of a clerk, or is this something that we put upon our clerk?
It's not statutory, although almost every clerk, every township, if they have cemeteries, the whole cemetery management and sale of the plots and record keeping, because it would just fall under the record keeping clause of a statutory responsibility of the clerk anyway. So I think that it's just been historically, Trustee Thomas has just always reverted to the clerk.
I've got a question for Ms. Salvati. That'll be easy for you. Here, come on up in front, Ms. Salvati, if you could. I believe I know the number, but what percentage of our properties are we required to reassess each year, or to go out and actually take a physical look at?
Reinspect 20%.
20%? So every 5 years, we're reassessing 100% of our properties in essence.
We've looked at 100, we've been out with
Right.
our feet on the property, looking at the buildings, measuring them.
How many years, we, right now in that department, we have what, 1, 2, 3, 5?
There's 5 of us.
Okay. Has that number been pretty stable over the years, or?
That's been there for a long time, probably all the way back to where he was showing the 2003 budget.
Okay. So we've had considerable growth. I know, we've averaged about 100 new homes a year, I think, for a number of
I
years.
think I checked, in the last 12 years, we added about 800 houses.
800?
So every year, our 20% becomes higher and higher because there's more
More homes.
properties to look at.
Yeah, that's just homes. But then when we look at places like Molex, McLaren, Magna, I've got to imagine a commercial property takes more time to assess than a home.
It takes more time to pull the plans, to sketch it, to go out and walk through it, to measure it, to put it on the roll. Everything about a commercial or industrial property takes longer than most of the houses.
So how are you able to, when you increase by 800 houses, and I don't know how many more, I think we increased by, was it 120 million in taxable value last year?
We're
How
at
are
the
we able
point
to-
that we're struggling, and we're gonna have to either get a half-time employee, start shoving some stuff out to other people, because we can't keep up with it at this pace.
So you mentioned that, what is it, MAOA?
MMAO.
MMAO? So that, just for the residents' information, that when we reach a certain level of taxable value, then that kicks in, that we're required to have a level 4 assessor
When
go
more
review.
than 20% of our roll is commercial and industrial, and we're just over 20%.
Then we have to have somebody that's a level 4 assessor come in and review our tax
Right,
roll.
and they'll be doing the same job that I'm doing, but they have a level 4.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm glad that we have 2 people studying for that. It'll probably save some considerable expense, and I know that those are far and few between in terms of, and those people are highly sought after at this time. But okay, that's yeah,
Yeah,
Mr. Mansur.
Hi.
Hi.
So we've heard about the increase in the number of residences. We've got obviously building, commercial going on all over the place now. Your budget, I think, as you presented it, showed maintaining the current level of staffing. And yet, just a minute ago, you were talking about how stretched everyone is and how commercial takes more,
only
et cetera.
maintaining right now because we got those tablets.
So,
Probably next year, we're gonna be looking at a different story. But
so that was the question I was going to ask. Is there some tipping point or some point at which, you just have to say, I need a part-time person or whatever? So I guess as we go through the budgeting process here, if we could kind of have a better understanding of what that would mean if we had another 200 houses, or if we had another, 1 million square feet of commercial, something like that.
if there was another part-time employee at the point that we have more houses and stuff, we would combine them between commercial, industrial, and residential.
Right, I'm just trying to get a feel when you present back, maybe what point we have to
Helping
look
with
at
those
that.
re-inspections would be
Yeah.
key. And as well as I would probably use somebody to help set the ECFs in the neighborhoods.
But is there a tipping point? You think that it's not this you're talking about next budget year, not this coming budget
Not
year?
this coming year, but the next year.
The following year
The next year.
That the efficiencies that you've gained through the tablets, whatever, are allowing you currently to keep up, but
We've been able to do this for 2 or 3 years without having to come forward and say, we need another person, or we need a part-time person, or something. Certainly, we'd want them to be certified. We don't want to just take somebody off the street with no knowledge, but we're going to have to look for something more.
all right. Mr. Atkins. Mr. Atkins?
Well, I had a question for Mr. Limita, so I can...
Does anybody else have anything for Ms. Salvati?
Yeah, real quick. Director Salvati, is there a way that you can walk us through, not tonight, but maybe Thursday or next one of our meetings, on how you come up with deciding how a religious house, resident, not on church property is exempt? And I'd like to take a look at how you decide.
Need a parsonage?
No, it's residential homes that are exempt.
Yeah, parsonage.
There'd have to be a parsonage. There'd have to be somebody from the church.
Living there, right?
Well, yeah, living there.
Right.
But there's 4 examples of residents of ours that are Flint ministers, and their churches are in Flint, but yet they live in our township, but yet they don't pay any property taxes on them. I just wanted to, what I've read, when I went through the laws, the state of Michigan laws, it's up to the director and your department to decide who's exempt and who's not. So, not tonight, but in maybe next meeting or next month's meeting, I'd like you to map us through that decision-making process.
We actually had Mr. Laddie, I think, look into that issue, so I think probably Mr. Laddie could update us at a
Well,
meeting
Mr.
coming up.
Laddie told us it's Director Salvati's
Right.
discretion.
I think the 2 of them looked into it, but
Right, we've talked on several of these as to whether they
qualified.
And I'd like to know why.
Yeah, we can go through that.
Okay.
And the
Sure.
state tax commission provides qualifying points, and they have to
Right.
hit those qualifying points, and all of
And
those,
then
the
it's
ones that are
up
in
to-
question in the township.
And then
they
it's
want.
up to Director Salvati
Yeah.
to make the decision.
Right.
But
Answer points.
I'd like to know what the tipping is and how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do that.
Rubric, yeah, what's the rubric for?
But we're not gonna allow you
Rubric for
to,
that.
we're not going to allow you to turn your home into a parsonage.
Oh, is that where this is going?
Okay, Mr. Atkins.
Giggle, giggle.
Yeah, I wanted to understand what your plan is to strengthen our ability to find and secure grants. I know we're kind of weak in that area. Is that something that you have the department heads that are well-versed in doing that when they go to look for any additional training or equipment? Or does that all flow through your department and...
So we have a grants policy in place, and department heads are looking for grants for specific things. Like you've seen us apply for the AFG grants for firefighting equipment in the past. You see the grants that we get through the police department. Those have always been pursued by the department. They're reviewed by me once they've identified and looked for what they qualify or if they have a qualifying purchase for those grants. As far as other grants, for what we're looking at, I mean, primarily it involves, are you thinking more like Parks and Recreation?
Parks, library,
Senior center.
senior center.
I mean, up till now, we haven't been involved in the operation of any of those things.
Well, we have been in the library, and I was surprised at the city did a pretty good job at finding that grant money.
Yeah.
And I think some of those things, may slip through the cracks because we may be a little tight on staffing, and I realize you can't hire a full-time person to just search for grants, but just wanted to know if there was anything that's on your radar to
I mean, if there's specific things where the board wants to pursue grants for or to expand something that we don't have budgeted for, we want to assist in that. Right now, our focus has been on MNRTF grants, right? All of them been on trail grants. We've worked on one every single year since I've been here, sometimes multiple ones. We were awarded the local TAP grant for the Dort Highway. We're still waiting to hear. We had to resubmit some stuff for October 1st. So we have worked on grants. Primarily through large grants through MNRTF to expand the trail network. That's been my focus, and those are the grants I've worked on. As far as going to expand it, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, we probably would be, I would have to invest in probably a grant writer, which isn't a bad idea, but to invest in a grant writer to go after specific grants, who you pay them, and generally they have, they're paid by a percentage of the grant that they help you get. They get a percentage of that. But it's, you know, I didn't put that into the budget. If you want to pursue something with grant writers, either, you know, specifically for Parks and Recreation or just generally, we can do something with that.
One of the things that we did, Mr. Atkins, with regard, we had an issue with a grant in the past, and it may have been our previous board. I'm not sure if it was this board, but
it was
previous, yeah. That we had a department submit a grant, but didn't get approved. It was actually the fire department, and would have committed us to actually having to hire somebody for a period of time with that grant. But then as soon as the funding ran out, we would have had to pick up the funding. So we made it a policy that any grants that are written come through Dennis's office, so that we know before they even apply for it what it is. With regard to the library and Parks and Rec, I think up until now we've let the Parks Commission pretty much handle theirs for the senior center. I know the senior center, looking at their budget, at least the county budget, which I know Mr. Massey served on, gets quite a few grants now. I don't know if the local senior center does, but you know, that's something as we take a more active role in the Parks and Rec, as well as in the library and senior center. I think we could probably look at those, because those are actually probably some of the target areas that grant writer, you know, that the grants are available for. I'm not sure there's a lot of them available for our other departments, but those certainly, to my mind anyways, would stick out. I'm not a grant writer, but I would think those three areas are probably areas that would be great for them. Mr. Thomas?
Superintendent Lehman, you and I have had this discussion privately about grants and such, and I'm piggybacking on Trustee Atkins' point. Would you feel comfortable with looking at other communities with the same SEV or same size? Maybe it would, I've discussed with you in the past, but maybe it's time we do hire a grant writer. I mean, it's another thing taken off your plate with the DDA and everything else.
I mean, typically, the answer to that question is if we want to hire a grant writer, you typically look at it grant-based. It's grant-oriented. Right. And you're going to interview, go out for RFPs or interview grant writers that you're looking to see their success. You're going to call and find out how people felt about working with them. You're going to look at some of their submissions. But it's typically grant-based. Are you going after fire grants? Are you going after recreational grants? Are you going after, you know, something else? And then try to channel that energy. But we can put that in. I mean, we can set aside X amount of dollars. I mean, one nice thing that the board has at their disposal is with the millage funds that we have available for the capital for Parks and Recreation, you have the ability that money is to expand, and so you have a tremendous amount of leeway in there that you could use for grant writers to expand. You can use it as matching funds, typically, you know, 26% or more as matching funds, so that we can go after those things. That, I mean, we can certainly budget that for 2020 if we want to just, you know, it's hard to put because it's usually a percentage, like I said, of the dollar amount of the grant you're going after. But we can certainly budget funds for that in 2020.
Your time's more valuable to us as the job that you are doing now. And we were discussing just recently about we have to either get you some help or something to get something off your plate, especially with Tech Village and the DDA, and you are doing a tremendous job on that. And you know, that's what we hired you for. And if we have to go out and we have to hire a grant writer, so be it. I mean,
But one of the things that we're going to discuss a little bit later, just briefly, and maybe we'll talk about it more on Thursday, but one of the things I'm familiar, I've written a number of grants in the past and received federal grants as well as state, but what I'm aware of is that most grants are for new services or something new. They're not going to fund just existing activity. They want to see that you're building something, you're starting a new program, what have you.
There's fire grants out right now to build new fire stations.
So that's one aspect of it, but you also have to be prepared for the ongoing funding. So for example, you start a new program, it may provide the funding for a couple of years, but you have to realize that after a year or 2 or 3 or however long the grant is, you either drop the program or you've got to have funding in your budget by that time, or come up with some way that you're going to generate funds through that program to maintain it. So that's another consideration. But I think one of the things that we look at if we're going to do any strategic planning is it's much easier to go out and seek grants if let's say a fire department, if we know what that looks like, the cost, what have you, and the needs. Now if you hire a grant writer, you can say, hey, we're looking for grants to fund this new pavilion for the parks. We're looking for somebody to fund this splash pad or what have you. And people, I know Mr. Adkins brought up conceptual drawing. Well, in my mind, people buy into those things, and so do grant. The people that sit on boards for grants are looking at those things and want to see what your vision is and that you have a plan for something. And if you do, it's much easier to buy in for funding. But I think it's certainly something to take a look at. But I think it'd be more helpful if we had a plan that we're looking at. Hey, we need some funding for these things. Mr. Lehman, when he goes out and interview grant writers, we interview somebody who's proficient at writing grants for, if it's fire that we're looking at, because there's some people can specialize in that. There's some for Parks and Rec,
DDA,
library, what have you. I think it's just something we haven't tasked Mr. Lemata or put our finger on. Hey, this is where we want grants.
Yep, totally agree.
Yeah, Mr. Mansour and then Mr. Atkins.
So, Trustee Thomas was starting to go to this point, but I believe the DDA's budget is completely independent of anything you would submit, right? So it's, all right, you have no interaction with that at all. So in terms of the budget here and your organizational model, have we looked at any benchmarking? Have we tried to benchmark ourselves against any other township community of this relative size? And again, in terms of where we're spending our money, the departments that are being funded, the overall structure.
We have, and there's a lot of that. There's a wealth of information available through the ICMA, the International City Managers Association. We've looked at it, but even if you compare like size, the big 20 townships in Michigan, or we look a lot at Meridian Township because they're very similar in population. But if we try to benchmark it, really it comes down to where the Board of Trustees wants the direction to be. When you look at police department spending, for example, we spend $8.3 million for law enforcement in this community. I can show you like-sized townships that spend $6 million or $5 million, $4 million. Does that mean that we're double spending what they're spending? Sure it does, but it also means that the level of service that we provide with the number of officers that we have depends on the safety of your community and what your residents expect. So there's a lot of that, Trustee Mansour, that we can do a comparison, a compare and contrast on whether it's police or fire. And even when we did the MGT study, and we're looking at like-sized fire departments, you heard the MGT guys say, it's really hard to compare fire departments to fire departments because everybody has a different model. Everybody has a different idea that works for their community. So when we're comparing against locals, we're like, okay, but they have all full-time. Well, then that's a different model, and so what are we spending, and does that make sense for us? But we can look at each department, and we have over the years, on what does that look like, and especially our biggest expenditures. I mean, finance is finance, assessing is assessing. I mean, those are mandated things that we have to do, and there's, it is what it is. It's based on the volume of work we do. But the big key, police, fire, even DPW, those are the things that we compare, but you just have to know that when you get into it, it's not apples to apples.
But I mean, there are probably some key features that we can compare, like response time to response time and amount of money. And I mean, the townships are 36 square miles, and so I mean, there are some similarities that can, the population is going to be different in some than others. But anyway, I'm not suggesting to do it on all departments, but maybe the DPW, police, fire would be reasonable.
Sure. Yeah, we can provide that information.
Mr. Atkins?
Actually, trustee Mansour covered my question, thanks.
All right, I think that is enough clarification. We'll have on Thursday a discussion of what our next steps are.
If there are any specific department heads you would like to be in attendance for Thursday, if you guys would just let me know if you have specific questions so I can make sure that they're here for Thursday's meeting in advance, I would appreciate it. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Melissa Roberts, the administrative assistant for the fire department. She's the one who stepped in and helped with this PowerPoint and really worked with each individual department head to put their PowerPoints together. She did a fantastic job, and I just wanted to make sure.
Are there any specific department heads that anybody would like to have at the meeting on Thursday?
DPW.
Police.
Okay.
You guys have the DPW hard copy budget that we handed out at the last meeting. We're still undergoing the rate study. That won't be done until November sometime, but we can certainly, Jeff, are you available for Thursday night to be here for the review? We'll go through the DPW budget at that time.
And I'd make a couple comments maybe offside of this on the planning and the planning department. So just a couple of things I noted on the presentation that I want some clarification on.
Go ahead.
So you'd like to have,
You want to do it now?
I'll just send an email after the meeting.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, thank you very much.
Did you get the police?
Yeah,
Police and
Chief
DPW.
Wiles, where you'll be able to be here Thursday, Chief?
We should have Burdette come in just because.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Limina, for that overview. And so now we will go to reviewing our Township Board agenda for Thursday. Hopefully everybody's reviewed the minutes that we'll be approving, or asking to approve on Thursday. We're going to have a recognition of Eagle Scout on Thursday as well, Alexander Hoffman. In our consent agenda, we're going to be approving payment of some bills from the treasurer in terms of $2,059,000. We're also going to be approving the use of this building for Optimist Club event. We also will be in the consent agenda approving a DPW 2020 pump maintenance program with Kennedy Industries for $11,650. The fourth item in the consent agenda will be a motion to approve the transfer of the DPW's 2004 Silverado for $6,000.
Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
Two questions here. First, and I'll email this to Superintendent Limita, a couple of questions about some of the expenses in here, Benestar, miscellaneous A, those kinds of things on page 45 of the packet. But item D, the transfer of the Silverado, to who are we transferring this?
So it's transferred to us through the Parks and Recreation millage, but because the DPW is a business activity versus a governmental activity, we have to be able to transfer those funds. We have to pay the enterprise fund back for the purchase of that vehicle. So it will come from the Parks and Recreation millage funds, which are township funds. It will become titled into the Grand Lake Township.
Why would we do that now? I mean, we've got kind of a Parks and Rec that's, kind of undergoing some change, and, we got it's the end of the season here, and I'm just kind of wondering why we would, kind of continue to load the asset base there when we have kind of things in flux.
It won't be, it's not going to be held by the Parks and Rec Commission. It's a township vehicle. Just like anything else that we spent out of millage funds, those are township properties, those are township assets, fully 100% owned by us.
So it'll be titled to us, it'll not be titled to the Parks and Rec.
It won't be titled to the Parks and Rec Commission.
So it's just within somehow
It's
one
in a
department to another, is that?
Because of the enterprise funds, we have to account for enterprise funds separately, or business type activity versus governmental activity.
Okay.
So because we have to account for those, that's all we're doing is saying we're gonna take $6,000 from Parks and Recreation funds and give it to the enterprise funds, because we have to account for that.
But we don't lose
asset.
title?
We don't lose title,
Okay.
we still own the vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for the clarification, Mr. Minister.
And that's the plow truck, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I have a question. This maintenance program,
on the pumps.
yeah, wasn't it before, did it come before us sometime, a month ago?
Last year,
Last
Mr.
year.
Sears?
Last year.
Oh.
2018.
Oh, okay, okay.
Every year.
I remember it coming before us, I didn't know when, I thought, so it was a few months ago.
Yeah, it was in 2018, you approved a partial year program and then a full year program for 2019.
Okay.
We approved a program for the generators, I think, a few months ago, right?
Probably,
Is that
yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
what you're thinking of?
Yes, yes, okay, yes.
Okay. Yeah, Mr. Atkins?
One thing about the Silverado transfer. So this will be used by DPW, or Parks and Rec personnel at the park?
Correct.
So maybe to question for Mr. Laddie, are there any liability issues with having the vehicle titled to us since we don't administer or have the employees on they're not our employees? You just loan the truck out to them, or do you have to create some policy? How do we know they're driving it correctly, they're using it correctly?
We could do that. First of all, the truck will
How
be
do we know they
insured.
have driver's license?
Well, that's a good point. The truck will be insured by Grand Lake Township. Also, I think Parks and Rec has insurance on our parcel, which is the park. And so, assuming that anybody who drives that vehicle will qualify under the Grand Lake Township's auto policy for proper use, then that person will be covered whether they work for Parks and Rec or not. And Dennis is going to have to be the one that figures out basically what's the appropriate use of that versus what Parks and Rec's required to do currently and things like that. But as far as just loaning a vehicle to an employee or a person that's affiliated or employed by Parks and Rec, we're not necessarily going to have an issue of liability just from an insurance standpoint, right?
I have a big concern because we don't administer the human resource portion to the employees, which we've offered several times and been turned down. And I have a big concern if somebody was in this truck, we don't have a process in place to verify, do they have a valid driver's license? Do they have a good driving record? Are they going to be out there in a careful manner? We don't patrol the park. We're not out there. These aren't our employees. What if they run into somebody? What if they run into equipment? I mean, you walk the park today and there are several things out there that are damaged. I mean, they've been hit with a ton of things that are not vehicles. Mowers and all kinds of stuff. So I have a big concern for that.
Well, I think, we share your concern in that, for example, we don't get, they're driving other equipment besides trucks out there too. I mean, driving mowers on hills.
Don't need a driver's license though.
So.
I mean, they're not our employees. I have a big concern about it.
Are they driving a truck currently out there?
Not our vehicles, I mean, that's not,
Okay.
Usually what we would have done with these vehicles, we sold them to the Parks and Rec Commission. But,
our vehicle.
at
In
this
this case,
stage of
yeah.
where we're at right now in our negotiations with how we're moving forward, I think it makes more sense to keep it established as a township vehicle. It's going to be used for this winter. We can hold off and just leave it parked here, but they said the other equipment that they use, we've been doing this for years actually. And as far as the policy goes, Carol is here. I'm sure she can speak to the policies of the Parks and Rec department right now, whether they have policies that they have to have valid driver's licenses. I mean, I'm not aware of that because I'm not in charge of Parks and Rec, but Carol, can you speak to that question of?
Yeah, they're all required to have valid driver's license.
Could I ask, could you step up, Carol, so I can ask you a couple questions on that? How do you verify that?
I personally take copies. I'm required to provide it actually to the township when we set them up with payroll. So we have a copy of I personally make the copy of everyone's valid driver's license.
How do you verify it's valid?
Based on date, expiration.
How do you verify if they have a DUI or reckless driving or any type of record that could put us at risk?
I don't.
Excellent, thank you.
We're not
Yeah.
running routine license checks on any other employee in the building.
Well, you know,
If it's-
we talk about policies and we talk about administering HR, we talk about the employees at the park, we talk about liabilities. You gotta start somewhere. Is this a good place to start? We're putting a motor vehicle into people's hands. We're not verifying, you know, their background and driving record. We do that for every department here.
I don't know if we do or not, but it might be something we take up
Only at
with.
hire date, we don't
Yeah.
annually run anyone's
Driving
driver's record after that.
The DPW drivers?
DPW is different because they have commercial driver's licenses, so those ones, they have to be run and everything gets reported immediately to us on anyone who's got a CDL license.
That's an outside service that does that for you, right?
Correct.
But as far as, so they're the ones primarily driving vehicles is the DPW.
Well,
Correct.
big
Well,
equipment.
you've got police.
Well,
You've
the
got
police, I
fire.
would guess they're, I mean,
We do run police department employees, their driving record and criminal history every 3 years, by policy per lien, but that's done by law.
so how do you make sure that a police officer in that 3-year period doesn't have some kind of driving record?
Show up when we ran them in that 3-year period.
Okay, so you'd find out after the fact though, is what I'm saying.
But we also have a policy that they're supposed to report that to us, now assuming they would report that to us and by policy.
Okay,
But, Mr. Chair,
yes.
let me make a comment. What we're discussing here now is very important. About, let me say, it's been 25 years ago, General Motors had a policy where all you have to do is go in and sign out a vehicle, okay? The assumption was that you had valid driving license. So this young man goes in and sign out a vehicle. He did not have valid driving license.
Mm-hmm.
And he had an accident. And matter of fact, 3 people were killed and 5 were injured, seriously injured. So General Motors was sued for a couple of $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
And they lost the lawsuit.
Well, you know, you bring up a point, Mr. Atkins, that maybe we need to develop a stronger policy on that. I mean, that's the purpose of our board, is to be forward-looking to see, you know, what risks are out there. So maybe that's something, Mr. Lehman, we can look at in terms of, you know, as we work on park policy and improve our own policies, that's something we need to take a look at very soon.
We've got a policy in place, they're required to have anyone we have a very specific policy on using township vehicles. They're required to have a driver's license, but we don't routinely just run licenses. If the board would like to include that into the policy, where annually we run it, or we put in there, like with DPW, it's contractually obligated that they self-report any infractions on their license because they have CDLs. We could institute that into the policy that everybody is required to self-report, and then we could run them annually or biannually, or
I think maybe you research it and come back to us. I don't want to make a blanket suggestion that we do X or Y or Z, but I would like to have you look into it and come back to us if you could with Mr. Laddie maybe, and see what, I don't want to create more liability by a policy that we generate without first researching it. Would that help, Mr. Atkins, with your concerns?
Well, the only concern is, you know, sometimes these things take a long time to research or policy or some action to make it back to the board. So I'm just uncomfortable turning the keys over to a vehicle. I mean, we have some time till snow falls, so maybe we can keep control of that vehicle until we figure out how we vet the employees that are going to be using our vehicle.
Yeah. You think, what kind of time frame you think we could
I mean, I can have it back to the board on Thursday, but if you're still looking at the entire policy review, if you want to get this one done first, I mean, I can update our current policy and have it in front of the board on Thursday if you want, or I can have it for the fourth Tuesday, I mean, whatever the
Okay.
board's.
I'd say see what you can do, and if it ends up being the fourth Tuesday, I mean, there's no rush. Winter's not coming that quick. Mr. Thomas?
Superintendent Lehman, I think it's a great idea that you're looking at our overall policy, but.
Well, we're
back
supposed to be.
Back to the concern of Trustee Atkins, he's talking about the Parks and Rec policy, usage of our vehicle.
Right, but if you're using a township vehicle, we control the use of that township vehicle. The policy would apply to whoever's gonna use the township vehicle, so our policy would encompass that.
And actually, all of us, I don't know, were we provided the policies yet, or I guess we're going to, yeah, we have a copy of all those, so hopefully we're gonna be taking a look, but I know we're waiting for a few committees to work their way through some policy recommendations that'll be coming to the board, and then we'll be reviewing the overall policies. But, you know, employee use of vehicles and reporting that might be something that we need to take a look at, or I think it is. So I guess if you can do something by Thursday, otherwise I think even the fourth Tuesday of this month would be fine. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I just had a question, because I know in the past, we have sold some vehicles to Parks and Rec, but I assumed that they actually titled it in their name in the past. I don't know if that's...
Those vehicles were sold to the Parks and Rec Commission.
Right, the last one that was sold to them was, what, a couple years ago, or?
Probably 2 or 3 years ago.
But didn't we have one vehicle that, like the old mail that I had, I thought was supposed to go to Parks and Rec, and then he ended up with a... Don't they have another vehicle from ours?
They have a vehicle on loan right now, that's the Colorado, that's used for their administrative staff. That is...
That's still titled in our name,
That's
though.
titled in our name, it's a...
That's the Colorado?
The Colorado.
Okay, so that's being used right now.
By the administrative staff. Oh.
Right. Okay. But prior to that, we actually sold it to them, I think. Because I remember that, the titles are actually changed in the past. I know recently we haven't done that.
They were sold to the Parks and Rec Commission, and they became an asset of the Parks and Rec Commission.
But because of the transition, that's why we're doing it this way temporarily.
Although based on the vehicles that they have out there now, I don't believe they'll have much residual value as far as
anything coming from
what's out there in the vehicles. From mostly what they have is old DPW trucks that are fairly worn out by the time we dispose of them.
So Mr. Lehman is going to come back to us with a policy either by Thursday or by fourth Tuesday. And if it's acceptable that we hold off on transferring the vehicle until then, we'll do that. Okay, so next under, yes, I'm sorry.
So should we just pull that one particular item off of the consent agenda?
Well, Mr. Lehman thinks that, well, we'll put it in the regular agenda.
Yeah, but that's right, just move it
okay.
up.
We'll put it into the regular agenda operational issues so that you can review any policy suggestions that you have, Mr. Lehman. With that, under future positioning, we have on Thursday, actually, the board will be presented with a request from the Grand Reserve Community Association to change the Grand Blanc Township Utility Ordinance to allow for the disconnection from municipal water systems for irrigation purposes. I know there's several, I know of one specifically that's here this evening that would invite them to make any comments at this time that they would like. I know Thursday we'll probably have some discussion on this, but if they want to say a few words, I've invited them to, and then we'll have more of a discussion on this amongst the board on Thursday.
Good evening, my name is Bob Emick. I'm the president of the Town's HOA Association at Grand Reserve.
Good evening.
Jim Wilda, I'm chairman of the Landscape and Grounds Committee at the Grand Reserve.
And my name is Jim Rabine. I'm the president of the Condominium Association of Single Family Sites. And with the departure of Pulte very recently, we've had one whole board meeting. I'm also the president of the Master Association, a so-called community association that owns and controls all the actual assets that provide services to our residents. We've been talking for about a year since we found out Pulte was leaving about how to move forward and make sure we got off of the right foot with the township. So we've had a lot of conversations with your administrative staff, and I put together a 1.5 page memo, which is now probably 7 or 8 pages long, that you'll probably get in your packet. It's full of legalese, engineering terminology, Safe Drinking Water Act definitions, and it's very, very technical. I've put in front of you today a very simple request. What are we looking for? We are not looking to separate our homes or our lodge from your water or sewer system. None of our homes, none of our condominiums have irrigation. Irrigation is owned and controlled by the Master Association. So, is it going to show up or not? Well, it's nice, it stopped working. I tested it before I came with the new batteries. Essentially, we have the light yellow, green area are our condos, the dark green are the area that's the condominiums, the duplexes.
It's on here, Earl.
And I do have a small copy of it here.
People want to see it.
I was trying to do that for the benefit of the audience.
I think it's for the audience.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
But basically, if you look at the top corner, top left corner, we've got a wetland nature park area, no irrigation there, no irrigation on the way in, except for a little bit of property abutting the street frontage. If you look down at the very bottom, there's no irrigation in the area just before the first street. That's a wetland. The water doesn't show up, but it's got water in it all the time. And right across the street, we've got wetland at the bottom of the hill and a man-made pond at the top. All these areas that don't require water aren't being watered. There's also, we've used to highlight these areas in a light yellow. There's also an area that's left as a natural area over at Baldwin and Vassar Road. Not getting irrigation today, not intended to get it. We've taken a lighter blue marking, and what's happened is that Pulte in the past, because they have municipal wells feeding for these ponds, these are basically either wetlands or they are part of the stormwater detention retention system. So for terminology, they're ponds. And Pulte has been using those ponds, collecting stormwater in them and supplementing that with pumps when necessary. And they are currently irrigating the frontage along Baldwin Road and the frontage along Vassar Road. If you look up inside, there's in the very first street as you come in the middle roadway, Del Webb, there's also a small area there that we're serving, and the area around the lodge. The area I've got some pink markings are the areas that we're talking about. And very preliminary investigations indicate that it would be cost effective, that we could save a fair amount of money, that the cost of making the improvements to take that part off your system would pay for itself in most cases in less than a year. And after that, every year it's a saving in our pocket. So we have this basic information. We're trying to give you an idea what the lay of the land is. We've just taken over the ownership. We spent the last 9 months chasing our tail, trying to review everything we had to do before Pulte walked out the door, try to get them to make sure they lived up to all their promises. So we've had very little time to look at this, and we're talking about work that's going to require well drillers, engineers, permits, not the kind of thing we want to start spending money on until we know something we can do. So our request is simple. We want to continue to service our 432 homes and our lodge and its 2 pools with municipal water and sewer services. We have 21 meter pits, and pits, vaults, take the term you want. These irrigation meters are outside in greenbelt areas. There's no protected building with a protected environment to maintain this equipment. So we have underground vaults that your DPW puts in meters every spring when it's time to irrigate after we do our backflow preventions and everything else. And then in the fall, before things freeze, they take them back out and we winterize our system. We're talking about where those are at, eliminating some of those and replacing with a connection directly to one of our ponds. And the numbers that we have here, I think, speak for themselves. With that, I'm now limited to 5 minutes. I'll be happy to answer any questions. We'll be back Thursday night to help hopefully continue the discussions.
Okay.
If I could just make a brief comment.
Sure.
You've all been elected by the residents of Grand Blanc to manage the government and deliver services in an effective and financially responsible manner. Jim and I were elected by Grand Reserve residents to do exactly the same thing.
Sure.
And that's what we're here for.
Yeah, we understand you're responsible.
Our budget's under 2 million, so we're not on the same level as you guys, but we still have people, and a good part of their monthly fees are in irrigation water.
And one thing we're facing is that the developer, while he was building and selling houses, subsidized costs to keep the fees low and attract new buyers. Now that the developer is gone, so is that subsidy, so we're trying to find ways to offset it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, gentlemen. I can say that I know I, for one, appreciate how beautiful your grounds are. I mean, it's definitely, you know, a plus to our township to have such beautiful grounds there along Baldwin Road.
Thank you.
But I think on Thursday we'll have some discussion on this and give everybody a chance to think over, and we'll invite you to speak again if you'd like to. Okay, Mr. Thomas?
I have a real quick question. Is there a petition involved with this also?
Yes, a bunch of our residents did sign a petition encouraging the board to grant us a necessary waiver. I guess we thought it was a question of a change of an interpretation of a term of art, not necessarily legal language. We got into it, it may be legal language, it may be a variance, it may, I don't even have a variance, it's too far over.
Just out of curiosity, what was the petition vote, or how did that work out, the percentage of yes?
We had it all at one of our meetings, and 200 and... or 300.
It's close to 300, yeah.
Close to 300 signatures out of our 432 sites.
I just really want to commend you three gentlemen for all the hard work that you put into this and the petition. Who made the suggestion with the petition? Was it somebody at our township?
No, I think it was one of the residents that said, let's make sure the board knows that it's not just poultry asking, trying to say some boxes, some voting residents that had a concern.
Thank you. I have a question.
Sure, Mr. Massey.
Are these the petition?
Yeah.
Probably, I have a question for you, sir. Where did you get this petition from?
We prepared it.
Oh, you
prepared it? Yeah, I looked at some other ones that were circulated online for other governmental agencies, and we doctored one on up, but a similar format, but not government related, just broader.
Okay.
So you made it up yourself, right? I mean, you looked at other ones, but you combined, you know, you made your own up, looking at other.
That's a really nice job, that's why I brought it.
Bob did it, so give him all the applause.
Nice job.
Good
Very
job.
nice job.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your time, and we understand that you're looking out for your residents, and we commend you for that. Okay, next item on the agenda is the under operational issues, motion to approve the changed invoice cloud for the township's payment vendor. Mr. Lemata, would you like to discuss that and what that would mean for our residents?
Yeah, we've actually been reviewing this for well over a year now, in fact, a couple of years, but last year with increased intensity. And the reason behind it being is we don't have the ability to take payments for everything that residents would like us to pay for. And so again, we talked about what's our job is to maximize service, and we think that this is the next step in maximizing services. It opens up the ability for our residents to be able to come in and make payments, even whether it's for our new on-base development ready process where people can go and get a permit. Right now they can't go on there, log in and pay for their permit because we don't have the ability with point and pay. However, Invoice Cloud fully integrates with BSNA, and we open up those possibilities. Now you can pay your taxes, get a permit, do whatever you need to do as far as from point of payment. So that's why we're asking the board to consider allowing us to move it forward. It's really based on expanded customer service.
One thing that, will this make it easier for residents? I know right now, the way that it's set up for somebody to pay their water bill anyways, using that as an example, they have to go into their property record, and it takes going to several different places, and it's actually very hard to find unless you know what you're doing to be able to make a payment. Will there be something right on the front page that'll be make a payment that it will help people to be able to do that?
Yeah, they actually will work with us, even with their marketing department, to help show people how simple it is. But we can put it so that it's right on our website landing page, pay a bill or need to make a payment. Then as they go through the process, say you're pulling a fence permit or a deck permit or something you need to pay, we can have the permit right there, so that it's like normally right now they'll click on the permit, they've got to print it out, fill it out, bring it in by hand and write us a check to collect it. They're going to be able to see that right now from the permit click on this, pay for it now, submit it electronically. You don't have to. What we're doing is eliminating that reason that they have to come in here.
So they can pay a permit fee 24/7. They don't have to try and make it in here before 5 o'clock, which most people probably can't. So I mean, they can do it at 7 o'clock at night. And so as far as receiving the permit, will that come back to them electronically, or will they still have to come here to pick it up?
Yeah, we can submit then, we can send things electronically. We can give them the approval process. That's the best thing about doing this is, again, how do we expand our customer service? Are we going to be more customer friendly? And this allows us to do that. I don't know if you had the opportunity to see even about what they do with those flexible payment options, whether you want to come in and see somebody, whether you want to do it web-based, mobile, pay by text. I mean, we're offering up a whole new realm of possibilities that we've never offered here.
Because right now, I know people are trying to beat the clock to get here to pick up a permit. Let's say it's, you know, I'm going to put up a fence or a deck over the weekend and I need my permit. I've got to be here by 5 o'clock on Friday. And if I'm working and trying to get all my supplies together on Friday, it's kind of tough to be in here and pick up the permit by 5. So I think it's going to be a huge benefit to our residents. Miss Lane?
Mr. Lemata, I've talked to you. We have people who make FOIA requests, and we have to wait sometimes for them to send us a check. Will they be able to also pay so that we can forward things to them quicker?
Any payments that we take, we can incorporate into this system. So that's a great point, Clerk Lane. Especially people who are trying to do FOIAs from, out of state or out of the area.
Yes.
We can collect any payments through this system.
Thank you. That will help me immensely.
Mr. Mansour?
So Clerk Lane was kind of on my same line of questioning here is, can we expand this to other payments? And you've indicated that we can do that.
I don't think there's any payments that we currently take that we can't put into this system.
Okay. The other question that I have here is that change to Invoice Cloud. Did we look at other alternatives to this particular service?
We did, and there's several out there. One of the reasons, as over the last 2 years, as we've continued to look, and we've had vendors come in and give us their sales pitch on why theirs was the best. I also ran through on a listserv with Michigan municipal executives on what everybody was using. The biggest determining factor for us, quite frankly, is not only were they good to work with, they had more options as far as the pay goes. But they are integrated with BS&A. They are the preferred vendor for BS&A for credit card processing. And then they also work with WaterSmart, which is a whole new online portal that we're looking into that lets our water customers, in fact, we had a conversation earlier today between Trustee Massey and Supervisor Bennett, myself, about a customer who had developed a water leak and didn't catch it. Now they're faced with a $6,000 bill that we're working with them on being able to cover. This system also works with WaterSmart, and WaterSmart allows customers to view and monitor their water usage even on a daily basis. They can look at it anytime they want to. They can receive high usage alerts, and it's tied right in with Invoice Cloud is integrated with WaterSmart. So that was one of the determining factors also, because we really want to move this WaterSmart forward at some point in the near future.
Is this a multi-year contract, or how is it set up?
So this one, we're going to buy into it, and then the way they describe it, it is multi-year, but we have, there's obviously some, because the customers pay the cost of Invoice Cloud, because we're not using tax dollars for it. It's really, we set it up, and then the customer pays that convenience fee from a payment standpoint, and they pay it.
Similar to the Secretary of State.
Very much like it, and what we have is then ongoing service, like they call it, why Invoice Cloud software as a service. There's no upgrades are ever necessary. We don't have to, we're not the ones in charge of that. They just automatically do it because it's in their best interest to make sure that we have the most appropriate software operating at all times.
So right now we take credit cards. Mr. Guzak is mentioning we do pay our own fee. Individual pays the fee.
If it goes through official payments, they do the same thing that the cloud is doing. It's all initiated by them. It's on our website. They go to official payments, and they're charged on their credit card, and we have nothing to do with it, okay? And then, of course, BS&A has come to us and said they no longer want us to stay with official payments, that they want to go with the cloud. So even on our side, the tax side, they were trying to push us to go that way, and that's why.
And they have two. They have Point and Pay and Invoice Cloud.
Right.
So a lot of people use both.
Right.
Our biggest determining factor, like I said, is what Invoice Cloud is not only recommended by BSNA, but it's because they're integrated with
the
water
smart,
as
yeah,
well.
with the smart.
I think it's a smart
That's a
move.
great idea,
I think it moves us into the new century. Yes, Mr. Massey.
Will it tell us whether funds are available or not?
Yeah, I mean, they won't process something that isn't.
It's like a regular credit card process. They have to approve it, and once we get it, we get the money. It's not. It's a credit card on the other end that they charge.
I guess what I'm asking, can anyone get a permit and the funds are not there?
I wouldn't think so because it's being
I
charged.
didn't ask you that. You tried to explain something that I asked, and when I reversed the question, you told me you didn't think so.
Actually, I'm in this business as far as the credit card processing. The question that I would ask, I understand what you're asking, Mr. Massey, and I think if Mr. Limita doesn't have the answer to this, he can ask them. But what we want to find out is there a potential for chargebacks? What that simply means is that if I own a business, appliance store, what have you, I buy an item and then I go home and I call my credit card company and I tell them, hey, you know what? I want this thing taken off my bill. They charged me the wrong amount. It's not the item that I wanted, whatever. What happens is the credit card company actually charges back to the business that amount of money, and then you've got to justify why you're owed that money. So I guess what I would wonder is how, if I pay for a permit and then I call up my credit card company and say, hey, I want to dispute this charge, who's hit with that dispute? Are we, because typically there's a fee for that dispute.
So one of the benefits we have in that process is that anytime they're issued a permit, it's going to require us to sign off on whether that was approved or not. So if they bounced back on the payment, we'd know that long before we had to do the final inspection or any inspections attached to that permit, where we could then reject,
Yeah, we can stop the whole thing.
Reject the permit.
They have up to a year to dispute it. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah, well, that's what my credit card,
Well,
they have up to a year to dispute it.
but being that it's a third party that's providing the service, maybe they take liability for it.
I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
I'd be happy
that's
to
something we
ask
can ask.
That'd be awesome.
Is how chargebacks how they handle chargebacks, if we're responsible for the fee or the refunds. Some businesses the processing is more costly because they have a higher incidence of chargebacks. I don't know where government stands, but it's a specialty that I don't do. But anyways, I think it's going to be a great improvement to being able to
Me too.
provide customer service to our residents 24/7 and make it. I know you can pay your water bill on it with the credit card right now, but it's very cumbersome to do that, and I think this will make it much easier for people, and probably we'll probably see a little bit of an effect on people coming in, maybe. Yes, Ms. Lane.
Is there a specific time, date that we'd be able to implement it and say to our residents, it's going to be effective November 1st, December 1st or something?
We have to give 60 days notice to our current provider. And so these guys were ready to go as soon as we're ready to go. So if the board approves it, then I think the best thing for us to do is to get our marketing materials in place and get those out to the residents, get it out on social media, get it out on the website, and then get a mailing out to all the residents to let them know that they have new payment options, including if they have ACH processing currently that they're signed up for, we're going to be changing that ACH process, so that's going to require them to fill out a new form to keep that moving forward. So I think we need to give ourselves 90 days to make sure that we market it, and with the 60 days notice that we have to give, I think the timing is probably perfect for the somewhere after the first year.
Thank you.
Quick question that brings up is that when we mail out the bills, the water bill, right now there's an envelope or whatever, you send it back with the stub, whatever, with your check. Will there be the ability with this service, if somebody wants to put their credit card information in there and send it back, as opposed to a check?
I think that we could certainly accommodate that if that's where
I'm just wondering if that's something, but it might also be something that they check off a box on their bill saying, I would like to use this, kind of like the ACH, but with a credit card, where they use that as their form of payment.
I mean, we're going to have to add we'll have to add the cost of whatever
Right.
it is, to the, as long as we have that clear, I don't think that's an issue.
Right.
We'd rather they went online than sent their credit card information in for obvious security reasons, but
Right.
our job is to take the payment however they want to make it.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
Yes, my question is, I don't see a dollar amount attached to this. So for the township to implement this, there's no cost to the township?
So in the packet, what you saw, and I don't know if it totally transmitted in with what they sent, but there was it shows you kind of like what they charge for it. Again, that doesn't, it's not the charge to the township, it's the charge to the customer to use the card or to use ACH or to use the payment of their choice, their payment. So and we did negotiate these when they first came in. It was, the ACH fees were higher than what the initial, or what we had been paying with current provider. So we actually negotiated that down to get it closer to where we had been, so there wouldn't be as much of an impact on township residents. But there's one for every, whether it's tax payments, it's DPW, we actually have a complete biller payment breakout that shows you what the cost is and what it pays, but again, not the township's fee, the resident's fee. If it was an ACH reject, for example, now if we get, somebody sets up an ACH with their checking account and it gets rejected, we already have a process in place that we're going to charge them for that. Like they get paid, they get charged for having an ACH reject, that they have to pay us a penalty on.
So just for the public, I know they can't see this, but they'll be able to pay by text, mobile payments, web payments, or a customer service representative if they wanted to call in and make a payment. And so all those on IVR, which I think is basically being able to use Google Wallet or Apple Pay.
Right.
But all those will be available, Mr. Lemina, to our residents?
Yeah, that's the greatest thing about this, is they really do open it up. Whatever form of payment is most convenient for our residents, that's what we're going to offer them.
That's great. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, plus I think they do have some reminders for all the clients too, and things that automatically they text them back if they have, they say, well, your payment's coming due, quote soon. So there's other reminders that help the customers remind.
They have notifications.
So they don't have late fees, they
That's
get
great.
more prompting, so
Excellent.
it's a nice system.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lehman. I think that'll be a great program. The next item under operational for Thursday is that the board will consider a resolution to amend the Green Valley Special Assessment Roll. And the cost was revised from $352,223 to $324,000.
Actually, do you want to go with it, Mr. Laddie?
Yeah, we have one more revision.
Right.
It currently stands at $326,568.79. And then we're anticipating a bond resolution not to exceed $327,000. So what's happening is we're getting a better view of the actual administrative costs and the revised downward construction costs. So each time we've shown a pretty good reduction so far, and we believe, with the exception of the interest rate, that we're honing in on the final amounts, subject to, of course, some odds and ends for the project itself, and we're not really anticipating them in this case, but in the past we have seen them from time to time. So you will see a revised resolution with the new amount, and then shortly after that, and that could happen at the end of October or November, you'll probably see a bond resolution that will arrange the financing.
Any questions on that project? I actually received a voicemail from a resident praising the work over there. Of course, it's a county, project, but I was happy to accept the gratefulness on behalf of the township, of course. But no, the county, apparently the residents over there are pleased with the result. Next item on the agenda for Thursday, the board will consider approval of a resolution to renew an agreement between the township and Michigan Department of Transportation, where the township will continue to maintain the I-75 Dixie Highway Park and Ride, and authorize our township superintendent to handle all agreements and contracts. So anything new with that, Mr. Limita or Mr. Sears? There's, by the way, there's electric car charging stations there as well, or?
There is an electric car charging station. I highlighted that in my memo.
Okay.
Supervisor Hoffman worked very hard to get that charging station down there. It's the first in the state of Michigan at a parking ride. So, yeah, there is one. Nothing new to this document. It's just a contract that several years ago the state approached the township and said, will you take care of this parking ride for us? We'll reimburse you for all the costs. Township said yes, and we've been doing it ever since. So they reimburse 100% of our costs. I submit a reimbursement to them every quarter, and they give us a check. So it's pretty simple. It doesn't take a whole lot of our time, and it's something that we kind of have control over. It's one of the first things people see when they come into our community from the south, so it's kind of nice to be able to take care of it. I doubt that MDOT would do a better job if they did it themselves. So,
Mr. Atkins?
How long was the previous agreement?
I believe it was a 3-year agreement, as is this one.
Have our costs stayed the same or gone up?
Our costs have relatively stayed the same, besides minor wage increases, but they pay us back for every penny that we submit to them, so we stay within the budget they give us.
So the agreement doesn't have a dollar amount spelled out, it's kind of pay as you go? Or?
It has a budget that they give us for the year, but it doesn't specify what our wages can be or anything like that.
And how long will this agreement be for?
3 years.
Okay. What about potholes and stuff on the concrete in the parking lot? Who takes care of that?
They take care of all that. The only thing we're responsible for out there out of our pocket, which, interestingly enough, I did not know this, was the electric car charging station and the streetlights. The township paid to have the streetlights put in several years ago. And when I contacted MDOT 2 years ago to have them repaired because most of them were out. And they said, we can't do it because they're not our streetlights. We don't put lights up in the parking lot. So we had them repaired, and now we have them maintained. But that's, I guess, something that we committed to a while back, and we can't really get out of now. So I think even if MDOT took them over, we would still be liable for those streetlights. So.
Is the charger used very frequently, do you know?
I couldn't tell you, to be honest with you.
How's our utility bill?
I know we pay an electricity bill, and I think it's very minimal. So I don't know how much it's actually used. I'm sure it is, but
yeah.
I could probably find out.
Usually don't see them at a park and ride because the whole thing is to park and ride.
Well, there you go.
Be charged up and ready to go. Or
They may get more
usually
use
they're driving those.
They may get more use as time goes on and a few more electric cars.
It's a neat thing that Supervisor Hoffman worked very hard to get, and she's very proud of it. So.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Sears.
Yep, thank you.
Good one.
Okay, on the agenda for Thursday, we'll discuss our annual budget and how we want to proceed there. So, again, we appreciate the presentation Mr. Lehman and the department heads made this evening and the information shared with us. Also on Thursday, I know it's getting a little bit late tonight, but I shared with you, and hopefully you'll have a chance to take a look at, is I shared with you the strategic plan from a couple of different municipalities. In fact, there's 3 different documents that I emailed to you. You take a look at those for Thursday. The whole idea behind, strategic plan is to map out where we want to go over the course of the next several years. We talk about the parks and recreation a great deal, and talk about a whole lot of ideas out there, whether it's fountains in the ponds, or paving the entryway, lighting it, putting signs along the pathways. We talk about, are we going to need a new fire department building down the road? And when would that be, and how would it get paid for? We talk about, what can we do with the area between Hill Road and Maple Road in terms of economic development. But all those things, pathways are a big concern with a lot of our residents. A strategic plan would allow us to put those on paper, put a date on those and also assign who is going to make sure those things are done. And I'm not talking, things that are like a year out or 2 years. I'm talking 6 months from now, what's going to be accomplished. So I hope you'll take a look at what I emailed you and the plans that I sent to you. And we'll have a discussion on Thursday. I know we're looking at how much time we're going to be spending on our budget. But again, I would say that our budget is also predicated on what our plan looks like. Right now, our plan for Mr. Lemata is basically save as much money as you can and let's put it towards OPEB and maintain our current service levels. I think you heard all the department heads say that their plan is to maintain service levels. We really haven't asked any of the departments to look at any special project, but if we put together a strategic plan, the department heads would be tasked with some special projects that we detail in the plan. I think right now everybody from Parks and Rec, like we mentioned, to police, to fire, they're basically going to maintain the current service level or try to increase it. But it's up to us to look at, where do we want to go in the future and where do we want to be 2 years from now, and task Mr. Lemata and the department heads with coming up with a plan of how we get to those points that we want to achieve. So if you could take a look at it, and we'll have a further discussion on Thursday with that. That would be good. Okay. We're going to have some board reports on Thursday as well, and I just want to I'm going to bring up tonight under what I'm going to talk about on Thursday a little bit, and that is I've received numerous correspondence from residents in a particular neighborhood that we've actually several years ago they came to us with a petition to pave their streets. They actually at that time I believe had the appropriate number of signatures, but the cost was a little bit higher than what the actual cost that came back from the road commission was a bit higher, I believe, than what the original estimates were. So we actually said, okay, we won't move forward with the project. More recently, they came to us with another petition that I don't believe they had enough signatures for the whole neighborhood. However, this neighborhood consists of two lengthy streets and several smaller streets that connect the two longer streets. The people on these longer streets actually had a very high percentage of the residents sign the petition in favor of the road project, somewhere between 57% or higher, and of the frontage, that they would like to move forward with it. So I think one of the things they're asking us to consider is to consider moving forward with a special assessment district for their particular streets, and those side streets that were not in favor of doing the paving project, leave them out. As you know, there's another way that we can handle a special assessment district, and that is that we can actually put in place a special assessment district without a petition. In essence, that's what we'd be doing here, because they don't have a petition to pave the two main streets. We'd be putting one into effect for them. I know that some in the community think that there's a time when this board, and I'm not saying us individually, but I've heard from residents that we should consider that when a road or neighborhood streets reach a certain level of decay, that this board should act to put a special assessment district in place, even if the residents don't come to us, primarily because it brings the entire township property value down. I think this is one of those neighborhoods. I've driven out there several years ago when they initially came to us, and I've driven out there recently. And when the streets fall into total disrepair, it doesn't help property values, and it starts a downward spiral for the properties and the maintenance of them and what have you. And I think you drive out there, you'll see evidence of that. So I would urge all of you to take a look at those streets, but we're going to need the residents in that community. And I think Miss Lane passed out to everybody. Everybody has one of these, Miss
Yes.
Lane? Miss Lane passed out to everybody a schematic that shows the properties along Robin and Thrush Drive. I take it the highlighted homes are the ones that would be included in a special assessment district, or what is that?
Right.
They voted.
If you do, well, there's a check mark by the homes that signed the petition that they submitted to me earlier this year, so that you'd know which ones those were. And if you were to pave Thrush and Robin, those are the properties that would be paying. There are some white lots in that area, and that's because people who don't access Robin and Thrush would not be included in the district, even though the road would go down one side of their lot.
Yes, Mr. Atkins.
You know, one concern I have is, you know, there are several subdivisions that'd like to get their roads redone. And, you know, I think there's different levels of, you know, you can either strip these things down to the base and you have $1 million job, or you can repave the entrance, or you can, you know, quite honestly, fill in some potholes. And, you know, why wouldn't we look at lower cost solutions as well as like shoveling some asphalt in some of these roads? I mean, you know, not everybody wants to do $1 million project, and sometimes it's just a few bad holes, or maybe it's just an entrance to a subdivision.
Mr. Sears, you want to comment on that? I think, for one thing, the road commission is the owner of these roads, and they're under their jurisdiction.
Well, they don't fill them.
I can certainly try. We have done some lower cost projects when the residents requested it. Typically, Green Valley's one that we just did. It was a lower cost. We just put a 3-inch cap on top of the road. I tend to, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but I tend to shy away from that option because I feel like at the end of their assessment, they're probably going to have a road that could be close to crumbling again. Maybe not. Maybe it'll last another 10, 15 years. But the majority of our roads are falling apart because they were not constructed with the proper drainage around them. So water gets underneath them and it heaves everything up. If we don't get down to that base and redo that base and put in the proper drainage, then the chances are good that that road's going to fail again, probably within 20 years. Whereas if we put in a new asphalt or concrete road right now, it should last 20, 25, 30 years again, if it's built the right way with the proper drainage, which is what we're doing now. We're making sure, the road commission is making sure that we are building a road that's going to last a very long time for our residents because they are paying for it. And some of the assessments are, they're excessive, they really are. Some of our roads, we just don't have an option to do a more simple project. For instance, across the street in Wishing Well, most of them are concrete roads, so we can't just mill those down and pave over them. They have to be ripped out. Some of the concrete's in good shape, so we can just fix it, but most of it has to be ripped out, and that's a very expensive project.
One of the things that the road commission has mentioned, and I think you were at the meeting, Jeff, when we were talking about, I think it was Wakefield, was that what some of these, how these roads were built was to save on expense, was instead of putting gravel as under the as the first layer, on the ground, they took concrete and mixed it in with the existing dirt in the roadway. Sure. And I'm not talking liquid concrete, I'm talking concrete mix.
Like dry, yeah.
Yeah, and then rolled it out, so you have, so basically the existing dirt and so that would over time harden, but it's not a base meant for a long-term road.
Well, it heaps. And shame on the folks that built the roads before us. I mean, we have to deal with their problems, but the reality is we have to deal with their problems now. So it's up to us to come up with the solutions.
So for us to put asphalt over that kind of thing, just not going to work.
I'm all for being proactive and finding cheaper cost projects. And I've been kind of talking to the road commission about that for a very long time. They seem to shy away from it because obviously they're the road commission. They own the road, so they're going to want a brand new road and they want the residents to pay for it. But with Green Valley's case, we did, get them to just put a cap on that. It does help the residents. It helps their property values. Does it help the road necessarily? No, but we did something.
I think they
So-
told us they won't do that again though either.
They did say they weren't very happy about it and that they would not favor doing it again, but the fact of the matter is if our residents are willing to pay for a road repair, then why wouldn't we take them up on that and accommodate it?
Ms. Lane?
I can concur with what Mr. Sears is saying. For example, with Green Valley, they didn't want to do a total redo, but I can tell you that the cost for the 5 years that this one is supposed to last, if they paid the same thing an additional 5 years, they would have had a 20-plus year road, rather than they will come back, because we had another one in Deerfield back in 2009, where they started saying, well, you did my road and it's only been 5 years. They forget that that was what they signed up for. And then when they come in and need it done correctly, it's more, 50%, 100% more than what it would have been if they would have believed us initially and made that 10-year commitment.
Mr. Massey?
I have a question for Director Sears. What type of repair was done on Emory Road at the intersection of Grand Blanc Road?
That was milled and resurfaced. That was done by the state of Michigan.
What do you mean by milled and resurfaced?
They milled down 2 or 3 inches of asphalt and put 2 or 3 inches back. So that surface was not in terrible condition. That's preventative maintenance is what that is. What they're doing is just sealing the top layer of asphalt so that no moisture, water can get in there.
Now, I don't know what you mean by it wasn't in terrible condition. I disagree with that. Every year for 5 years, they were always filling in the potholes.
Okay.
Up until about 3 years ago when they repaired it.
At Grand Blanc and Embry?
Yes. Every year they was filling in the big potholes.
Sure.
So now, whatever they did, it looks as though that it's going to last for another 10 years.
Sure.
So, my thought is, as an engineer, I'm not thinking about what the road commission is saying, okay? Because I don't believe everything they say.
Right.
I say I don't know about you. Okay, I'm speaking for myself.
I'm with you.
Okay, is that these high-cost roads means that you will never be able to repair the roads, okay? But if you go for a low-cost repair, at some point, within a reasonable time, you're gonna have all the roads repaired.
That's true.
So you agree with me?
Well, it's kind of a hard thing, Joe, because some of these roads are so bad that we don't have a choice but to rebuild them. Because if we just put Band-Aids on them, then it's a much shorter time frame before we have to put another Band-Aid on it and then another Band-Aid on it.
But, okay, let me make another point.
But let me answer your question though, because I've actually sat in meetings with the road commission where that issue came up, Mr. Massey. And what they're trying to do is balance. They're trying to take some roads that are not completely falling apart so that they aren't they don't have to rebuild them, but they're at a point, I think it's pays a rating of 3 or something like that. They're trying to focus on saving the ones that are before they go into total disrepair and fix them so that it maintains for another 20 years while also fixing some of the ones that are in total disrepair. But they're trying to maintain some that are kind of halfway gone before they get full blown. But
which is what we're doing in Grand Wailea also.
Right.
Let me make a comment, a true comment. If you travel up and down I-75, that argument doesn't hold water. And I'll tell you why it doesn't hold water. I guarantee you, if you see them repairing an area on I-75, I guarantee you, the next 5 years they're going to be repairing that same area. Right or wrong?
No, I agree. It seems like they do it constantly. Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
So what they're telling us doesn't hold water.
But I think also you're comparing I-75 to a residential street, and the traffic is a little bit different too. Regardless, we can come up with lower cost repairs for the residential roads. What people have to realize The fact of the matter is we may be repairing them more often. You know, and I'm not gonna stand here and say that the road commission, you know, they tell us roads will last for 20 years. Well, they're definitely gonna last for 20 years, because I don't know that. But they should.
Well, I know one of the
Their spec
concerns,
is very robust.
one of the concerns, and then we'll go to Ms. Lane, but and wrap it up, but one of the concerns is, you know, you don't want people paying a monthly or annual special assessment when the road's falling apart.
Right.
You know, why am I paying, you know, $2,000 for, you know, a year for 10 years and my road is falling apart? So I think, you know, one of the things we balance is, you know, and one of the things that our concern in Green Valley is the repair going to outlast their paying for it? And it's going to be an interesting equation here in the next couple of years to see if it lasts.
And I'm sure Green Valley will be a very nice road for a while, but I'm sure it'll be in the spring where I start getting calls about cracking and everything else, because everything's moving again and water's getting underneath that road again. And we will do the crack sealing in Green Valley.
Until they're paid for it.
There's going to be maintenance on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Ms. Lane? And then we're going to go to Mr. Laddie.
Sure. One of the subdivisions that we've just started doing is Grand Walea, and I am hoping that Concord Green, who had their roads done in 1998, will consider doing the same thing. Neither subdivision had lost their base, and therefore, by doing the milling and freshening up that road, they're going to get another 20 years out of the road for a much lower cost. But Hillcrest and Wishingwell, who have totally lost their base for whatever reason, partly because we put sanitary sewers in the roads, but that's where you want to start dealing with things, is at the end of a good 20 or 25 years of roads, when it just starts getting some bad cracks, you can mill it and it'll go another 20 years. But when a subdivision has let it go for 40 years, it has to be totally redone or people are wasting their money.
Well, I think, Jeff, would it be possible, I know it would be, maybe we get Mr. Vivandi in here, the director of the road commission, and we
sure.
You know, ask some of those questions of him, of, you know, what we're doing. Mr. Laddie had something he wanted to
Just on
discuss.
this, first of all, wouldn't you need to check with the road commission to see if they'll do just 2 of the streets? Number one, what will that look like in terms of what's the bare amount of work they'll do, and how much will it cost?
Have you talked with them?
We did confirm with them today that they would do just the 2 streets, and he did give me a rough estimate, which is roughly the same amount for those residents that it would have been to do the entire subdivision. So
we provide that information to the residents.
And they do, we lose economy of scale on it, obviously, because we are doing more roads. And we are also paving gravel roads with the previous assessment too. The gravel road residents don't want their road paved. So we are losing economy of scale.
What I would also be interested in knowing is, and I don't know if they could tell us this, is what the cost would be for those on Cardinal and Meadowlark, which are the 2 connecting streets that we wouldn't be paving. How much it would cost just to pave those, because if they think that at a later date they're going to pave those, I think they're going to get a rude awakening as to the price of what it would cost just to pave those 2 streets.
They absolutely will, and I'm pretty sure Miss Lane went through this in Concord Green.
I have.
And it will be expensive. I think I could get those costs, but to get a more detailed estimate, it's taken a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, just a kind of a rough estimate, because I'd be glad to go and talk to those residents and let them know that, you know, this is their best chance, if they ever want their roads paved, to do it at this time.
And I am talking very basic, Richard Hill, who's the design engineer down there, gave me this number within like a half an hour. So it's his very basic estimate.
Right.
It's nothing detailed. It's based on him driving the roads and knowing the conditions out there.
Well, they gave
and I
us
did ask for a very quick turnaround.
They gave us an estimate a few years ago that was very detailed, so he may be looking at that.
We have a detailed estimate that they got earlier this summer when Miss Hugo spent hours, as everybody in a special assessment does, frustrated for hours and hours and hours. And your only other option, gentlemen, if you ever want to face the challenge, is knowing that as of tonight, for those 2 roads, those people are going to be paying the same amount as if they did their whole subdivision. And my argument is, with the side streets, if they ever decide to do it, they'll be driving across these good roads unnecessarily. So your challenge is, do you want to bite a bullet and do it right for the entire subdivision and take the fallback?
You mean the fallout? Okay, Mr. Atkins.
2 questions. So for this project, like, what is their workload right now? You know, if you kicked them off today, when could they do it?
At the road commission?
Yeah.
You mean to pave the roads?
Correct.
This would be a next year project.
Okay, so if we are bringing the road commission business, okay, and they're running that far behind, is there some way we could work out an agreement with them that they could at least come out in the meantime and shovel some asphalt into the holes and keep it somewhat, you know, that's kind of the give and take,
Absolutely.
right?
They're pretty good at patching the potholes when I ask them to. It's just when I have to ask them to do the same subdivision every week, they get a little irritated with me, but yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of the things,
I'll pester them about it.
One of the things that they did, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Sears, was that they actually had some asphalt left from another job.
Horrible
job.
job.
They came down and they paved, they used what asphalt they had and paved down one side of the street.
Right.
They did what they call strip paving. Is basically what they do is they whatever dump asphalt they have left in their truck, they dump it, they smooth it out with their dump truck with the scraper blade, and they roll it over with their dump truck.
Because they got a 2-inch transition line, so if you were out there on a bicycle.
Well, there was a really bad section of the road, and every garage doesn't have paving equipment. And even if they did have paving equipment, they wouldn't be allowed to use it for that anyways. So, I mean, Aaron, who's our foreman, tries to look out and do the best he can with stuff like that, with extra material, and try and fill really bad areas of the road. That's a really bad area, and I did talk to Miss Hugo about that, and unfortunately they couldn't do the other side because technically they're not supposed to do that, and there were so many complaints about it that he's told not to do it anymore for us. So,
which actually they did it along Pollock Road, and it turned out quite well. I mean, they had extra on it. And actually, they did it a couple of years ago along McCandlish. But it's something we'll need to think about. We don't have to do it right now, but we'll talk about more of it later. But I wanted to make you aware of it, and we'll bring it up on a future agenda.
Just a quick question on this. There are 14 parcels here that are not shaded yellow that seem to be carved out of this special assessment district. Is there some reason for that?
The reason is those parcels don't have a driveway that goes onto Thrush or Robin.
The ones with the check signed the petition, though?
No, right. This white one right there. They come off of Meadowwood.
But it doesn't
It's
matter.
the
You're telling me
rules.
It's the only way that they, okay.
That's the way, there's some general
We don't have to approve
rules.
this, right? We don't have to approve this because why would we want to save themselves the misery of them being a self-defeatist and not doing the whole program? Attorney Laddie, have we ever not approved a road?
This group, we didn't approve them.
Normally, when we get when we're above 51%,
right,
we'll proceed.
Right.
There have been times when we've been above 51% and then we fall below that and we have not proceeded.
And that was the case several years ago with this very
Yeah,
subdivision.
because they backed out. Some of them backed out.
Well, what happened was that the price came in higher than the 10%.
Well, part of it was though, I'm sorry.
This is several years before this board.
Right.
But have we ever done it?
Yeah, but part of
Mr.
it-
Guzek?
Yeah, thank you. Part of it was that, I think someone said those other 2 streets were gonna cause a problem, there was ditching problems, and then later we found out that wasn't really the case, and so it would've worked, because they thought all the water was gonna come from there and drain, flood all these other roads, and then later the road commission came back and said, no, that really wasn't gonna happen. But it already stopped it, so that Thrush and Robin, they were out of luck.
To answer your question, Mr. Thomas, no, we don't have to do this, but we have a couple of residents that live in there that said, hey, please consider doing our particular streets, even
Right.
if these others don't want it.
Right.
We want it on the 2 main streets, so that's, I'm just bringing it to our attention.
I'm with you.
It's something we need to think about, and not that we're gonna decide tonight, but something to think about how we deal with the situation. Yes, Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, one other thing, back to your point, I think off of Fenton Road, that one subdivision back in there, I'm trying to think of the subdivision, we only did 2 or 3 streets in there. I think you were on that board that second year.
Yeah.
And we made it happen because those people wanted it. And then I remember
Springs.
people came in and says, well, I'm only 2 feet, I'm right next to this one, I want it. I said, no, you voted against it. It's starting here and it's going there. You should have voted for it.
Yeah, Holly Springs.
Holly Springs, that's the
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Miss Lane, and then we're gonna wrap it up. I think Mr. Mansur has his hand up to make a motion, but.
Well,
Miss Lane?
when you're talking about Holly Springs, I had a gentleman who was on the north side 10 years ago when we did it, and he said, now I bought another house in the subdivision in the south end. What's it gonna cost me now to get my road done? And it was double the cost that they had 10 years ago. So,
That sounds
it never
good.
gets cheaper, and you always should do it right, in my philosophy.
You gotta have the money to do it.
Mr. Laddie or Mr. Lehman, anything else that we need to cover tonight? Otherwise, we'll see everybody on Thursday.
Can I make a
Mansur?
motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.